Okay, thank you, Chair. We're now live.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Plans Committee for Cllr Borough Council. There's a number of things I would like to remind people of before we start with the items on the agenda. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council's website following the meeting. Under the openness of local government bodies regulations, people may film or record this meeting, and this is outside the Council's control. However, people wishing to film or record the meeting should do so in a way that does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Also, so that the meeting is not disturbed, please could I ask all those present to turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent to ensure that your environment is distraction-free. Can I also remind everyone that this is a public meeting, so please conduct yourself in an appropriate manner. Thank you. As this is a virtual meeting, it will run slightly differently. Members will need to introduce themselves and state their name and confirm that they can see and hear the proceedings. This is important for the purposes of recording attendance and transparency of the meeting. I will do so by undertaking an alphabetical roll call. Members will use the raise hand feature in the participants section of the Zoom software if they wish to speak in a queuing system. Voting will be undertaken by roll call of all present in alphabetical order. Each member will state their name and how they wish to vote, for, against, or abstain. Speakers will be called forward at the appropriate time by the chair, and their microphone will be unmuted by the co-host. Speakers will have 5 minutes each, and they will be timed by the co-host. When you have 1 minute of time remaining, a bell will sound. The co-host will then mute you at the end of your 5 minutes. If there are any technical problems with outside speakers presenting, then I will read out the speaker's statement, which has been sent in advance of this meeting. I'm going to call out the names of each member in alphabetical order to confirm their attendance. Councillor Roy Campsell. Councillor Roy Campsell, are you in attendance? Okay. Councillor John Capleton.
Yes, yes, Chair. Councillor Capleton, I can hear and see the proceedings.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Charles.
Hello, Chair. Yes, thank you. I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Sandy Forrest. Councillor Sandy Forrest, are you in attendance? No. Councillor Hilary Fryer.
Yes, Chair, I'm here and I can both see and hear you.
Councillor Daniel Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Grimley here. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Howe.
Councillor Julian Howe here. I can confirm I can see and hear the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor John Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm I can both hear and see the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Joan Tassell. Councillor Joan Tassell. Okay. Councillor Joan Tassell, can you unmute yourself, please, and confirm that you're here? You can see and hear.
Sorry, it won't do it. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can see you, Councillor Tassell. Can you just please confirm that you can see and hear?
Yes, I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Jenny Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear proceedings.
Thank you. And Councillor Emma Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Chair, if I can just interact, Councillor Forrest has now joined us, so if we can ask Forrest to confirm that she can see and hear proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sandy Forrest, can you both hear and see the proceedings?
No, you now try that.
Councillor Forrest, you are muted. You can just unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me now, please?
I can hear you now. Thank you very much.
I'm very sorry about the confusion.
That's all right.
Confirm that I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay. So speakers will be called forward at the appropriate time by the chair, and their microphone will be unmuted by the co-host. Speakers will have 5 minutes. So I think I've done this bit already. I do apologise. Okay. I just need to now confirm the officers that are with us today in attendance. I'm not going to ask each of you to come forward to reply, but if I can just name you all, so everybody knows who's in the room. There's Jacqueline Jackson, Group Leader Development Management, Karen Brightman, Team Leader Development Management, Principal Planning Officer Lewis Marshall, Catherine Harrison, Legal Advisor to the committee, Matt Goodyear, Information Development Officer and co-host for this meeting, Karen Widdowson, Domestic Services Manager and Clerk for this meeting, and Tom Delaney, Democratic Services Officer, who's taking the minutes for this meeting. Karen, could you confirm who the speakers are, please, for the virtual meeting wishing to speak tonight?
Yes, Chair. I can confirm that in the attendance list, in the virtual attendance list, we have for item number 1, we have Miss Hack, Richard Henderson, Councillor Julie Jones of Selby Parish Council, and Councillor Cllr Paling. They are also speaking on item number 2. Then for item number 3, we have Rebecca Cooper, Jonathan Weeks, and Councillor Richard Shepherd. And for item number 4, we have one speaker, which is Councillor Margaret Smidovitz, and I'm pleased to say that all are in attendance in the virtual meeting room. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1, apologies. Have we received any apologies?
So I can confirm that we've had one apology. Councillor Ransom sent her apologies for the meeting, and Councillor Howe is acting as a substitute for this meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of previous meeting. The committee is asked to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th September 2020. I will now call out each committee member in alphabetical order to respond. Councillor Roy Campsell, do you agree with the minutes are correct?
Chair, Councillor Campbell is not in attendance.
Not in attendance, thank you. I wondered if he perhaps turned up. Councillor John Capleton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've read the minutes and I confirm that I'm happy with them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I've read the minutes and I'm happy to approve them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sandy Forrest. You need to unmute yourself, Sandy.
I'm trying to. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes, I confirm I'm in agreement with the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hilary Fryer.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Howe, sorry, you weren't here for that meeting, so it's now Councillor Mark Lowe. Councillor Mark Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with minutes.
Thank you. Councillor John Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Joan Tassell.
Thank you, Chair. I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. I abstain because I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Emma Ward.
Yes, Chair, I agree.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Chairman, I can confirm that Councillor Campbell has now joined the meeting.
Okay, I'll just return to Councillor Campbell then. Councillor Campbell, are you in agreement with the minutes for the last meeting held on the 24th of September 2020?
Agreed, Chair.
You agree. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. So I can confirm then that the minutes of the previous meeting have been confirmed as correct. I will now sign them. Thank you. Item 3, questions under committee procedure 12.8. No questions were submitted. I'm going to ask Karen for clarification on that.
Chair, I can confirm that no questions have been submitted for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4, disclosures of pecuniary and personal interest. Karen?
So I believe that there is a declaration that needs to be read out by yourself as the chairman. I understand today or yesterday, the committee members received an email dated the 28th of October from Annette Wade regarding items 1 and 2 on the agenda. The members have considered that email, and all the information and the relevant information and submissions relating to the applications will be considered this evening. And also, I understand in relation to item number 4, Nampanton ward residents have also sent in an email to councillors on the committee today, and that information will also be taken into account during consideration of the applications. Thank you. Is there anything further you would add to that, Chairman?
Okay. I've just been passed something. It says, on your behalf, I have already advised the planning officers of the email, and we are recommending that the chair, on behalf of all members of the committee sitting tonight, makes the necessary declaration under item 4, stating that the committee members have received the email, confirm that they will consider it in line with other relevant information and submissions relating to the application. This refers to Pease Hill planning application. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, so I've just got a disclosure on item number 1 and 2.
Okay, would you like to make that declaration now?
Yeah. I just noticed I have dealt with one of the speakers before, Richard Henderson, in a professional capacity only. I've not spoken to him about this application, and I'm here with a clear mind.
Okay, thank you. Is there any others, or is that it? Okay. So, okay, we need to go to the planning application. So item 1, if I can hand that over, please, to the principal planning officer, who will talk us through it. This is application number P/19/1682/3/2 Pease Hill Farm, Ratcliffe Road, Sileby.
Thank you, Chair. If we can have the slides, please.
Yep.
So thank you, Chair. So for item 1, we're in Sileby, and the application seeks approval of the reserved matters for the landscaping, layout, scale and appearance in respect of the erection of 170 dwellings with associated infrastructure and open space. Next slide, please. So the red line shows the wider site area on which outline planning permission for residential development was approved by the Plans Committee back in January 2018. Members will also recall that as part of the outline planning permission was granted for the conversion of farmstead buildings and new buildings to provide business and community uses, of which members approved the reserved matters at the Plans Committee in August of this year. It's also worth noting that the reserved matters site area subject to this application is smaller than the outline permission, as it excludes 3 parcels of land to the northern part of the site, which is subject to a separate full application for 31 units, which is the second item on the agenda this evening. Whilst they are two separate planning applications, they are inextricably linked and together would provide 201 residential units. However, it is important to remember that this reserved matters application only proposes 170 units, as was permitted by the outline planning permission. In terms of the aerial photograph, it shows the site in its current context, and in terms of what is surrounding the site, members may recall from their previous considerations of this site that it is located on the eastern edge of Sarby, access from Ratcliffe Road, with Peasel Close to the north, Sarby Cemetery to the west, and open countryside to the south and east. Next slide, please. So in terms of photographs of the site, the image on the left is taken from Ratcliffe Road to the southeast of the site, and the image on the right is taken from the top of the existing farm access, looking southwest into the site itself. Next slide, please. These images are taken from within Peasel Close, which shows the sort of hip roof bungalows which define this particular area, which is adjacent to the site and therefore forms part of the site's built context. Next slide, please. So these images are taken within the site itself, the image on the left looking northeast towards Ratcliffe Road, and the image on the right looking southwest. Next slide, please. And again, the image on the upper left-hand side is taken from the farm buildings looking towards the rear of those properties along Peasel Close, and the other two images are taken from the edge of the cemetery at the site's western boundary, looking towards Peasel Close and Ratcliffe Road. Next slide, please. So before moving on to the proposed plans, members will need to be aware of and consider what was approved as part of the outline planning permission, as one of the key considerations for members is whether the proposed reserve matters complies with the parameters set out in the outline planning permission. These parameters are the subject of condition 3 on the outline planning permission, and the considerations for members to consider are set out on pages 16 and 17 of the report, and again on pages 23 and 24 of the report. Next slide, please. So in terms of what is proposed, the provision of open space, blocks of housing, the basic road layout and position of drainage features are all broadly in line with what was approved as part of the outline master plan. It is considered that the design and layout is an appropriate response to the site's context, and an assessment of the design is set out on pages 17 and 18 of the report. To aid members' understanding of the layout in more detail, the next few slides show the layout in more detail across the various areas of the site, starting with the area immediately adjacent to Ratcliffe Road. Next slide, please. So here we can see the roundabout, which will provide access into the site, which was approved as part of the outline planning application, with the layout and positioning of dwellings here forming an extension to those properties along this part of Ratcliffe Road, where they turn the corner into the site, providing an attractive entrance vista not only into the development itself, but also Sarby Village. The plot boundaries are also offset from the boundaries of those properties within Peasel Close and Ratcliffe Road to allow a landscape buffer and wildlife corridor to establish once the development is complete. Next slide, please. So moving further into the development, this slide shows the most southerly corner of and lowest part of the site, which is why the largest attenuation feature is located on this edge of the site. It also shows the area where the community and commercial uses would be located, of which, as I said, the details were approved by members in August. The first block of dwellings in this part of the site are typically larger detached dwellings set within spacious plots, taking into account the site's the edge of the site location within the open countryside, which is adjacent to the site to the south and east. As per the master plan and design and access statement approved as part of the outline application, the density increases further into the development, where it more closely adjoins the existing built-up areas of the village. You can also see on this section of the layout the extensive network of open spaces and interconnecting pathways which encompass the site, which again accords with the layout principles established by the indicative master plan and the design and access statement. Next slide, please. Then moving north to the heart of the development, which is occupied by the core area of functional and formal open space, with provision of various typologies of play and sport equipment to meet the needs of different age groups. As per the master plan, it was a key component of the master plan to maintain a sense of openness in this area of the site, with vistas orientated towards the open space so that the chapel building to the west becomes an attractive visual focal point for the development. You'll also note that in addition to the large areas of open space, key roads are enclosed by active frontages and junctions are enhanced by areas of smaller incidental open space and planting. Members should also note the coloured plots, which denote the affordable housing, which are dispersed adequately throughout the site with provision of bungalows along the boundary shared with Cllr Close, again, as is required by the Outline Planning Permission. Next slide, please. And then moving to the northernmost corner of the site, where the 3 parcels are located outside the scope of this reserve matters application and are subject to item 2 on the agenda this evening. Again, there are bungalows and 1.5-storey properties with large gardens along the northeastern boundary, shared with Cllr Close, with a separate landscaped buffer along the site's edge to protect the existing hedgerow and to provide separation between the existing properties along Cllr Close and those within the new development. Again, there is use of smaller formal areas of open space supplementing the larger areas of open space as well. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a segment of the landscaping plan which shows the most northern corner of the site, where a secondary pedestrian and cycle access onto Ratcliffe Road has already been approved by the Outline Planning Permission. This area is also to provide the allotments and an extension to the cemetery, which again were secured as part of the Outline Planning application and the associated Section 106 agreement. And finally, a secondary drainage feature will be located in this area of the site, together with incidental open space, with the dwellings proposed in this area overlooking the pathway and open space for natural surveillance, whilst providing a high degree of separation between the proposed dwellings in this part of the site and those that front Ratcliffe Road. Next slide, please. This is also taken from the more detailed landscaping plans in order to show the key area of open space, which will provide a leap, a neep, an outdoor gym, an enclosed hard surface ball games area, and more informal kickabout area, all connected to the development by a range of pathways with areas of supplemental seating. The existing area of woodland you can see on the plan there to the western site boundary will also be retained and managed over the long term. Next slide, please. So moving on to the house types, in all, as part of the reserve matters, there are 26 different variations of house types, of which some are shown here in order to give members a flavour of the sort of fairly neo-traditional design types typical of the applicant's development portfolio. Next slide, please. And these are the affordable units, which in officers' opinion are of good quality and are not distinguishable from the open market houses, and also include provision of bungalows. Next slide, please. And then in order to understand how the development will appear from within the site itself, the applicant has provided street scene visuals for a number of sections through the site. The first street scene to the top of the slide shows plots 2 on the right to plot 9 on the left, which is the row of units which are situated at the entrance to the development, close to Ratcliffe Road, with the lower street scene forming part of the low density block on the site's southern edge. Next slide, please. And again, then just some more street scenes for other areas of the site, to include the central street scene you can see there, which is the row of 1.5-storey properties and bungalows, which are situated on the site's northern boundary shared with Cllr Close. Next slide, please. And here you can see some sections through the site and that of neighbouring properties along Cllr Close, in order to understand the land levels between the site and the neighbouring properties and assess how the development will impact on those that occupy the nearest existing residential properties. So as was evidenced by the photos shown earlier in the presentation, Cllr Close does sit on slightly higher ground level, but notwithstanding that, the provision of bungalows on this site boundary reduces any impact on existing residents in terms of overshadowing, over-dominating, and loss of light or privacy. Next slide, please. So, key considerations for members. Officers consider that overall the application has been carefully assessed against the comments and consultation responses received and the policies of the development plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. Members, of course, will be aware that decisions on applications need to be made in accordance with the adopted development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In terms of the principle of development, the concerns of the parish council and residents are noted in respect of the reserved matters compliance with the outline planning permission. However, officers have worked closely with the applicant to ensure that the proposal does not undermine the outline planning permission, and independent legal advice has been sought and corroborated by the council's own legal advisors. It is officers' advice to members that the proposals do accord with the parameters of the outline planning consent, both in terms of the quantum of the development and the distribution of space and uses throughout the proposed layout. These considerations are set out in detail on pages 16 and 17 of the report. It is considered that the proposals relate to the built form and settlement character of this area of Sileby and would preserve amenity for existing residents and create a high quality environment for future residents. It is also considered that the proposed layout provides sufficient separation between the built forms of the development and the locally listed chapel building to the site's western boundary, and will enable the chapel to become a visual focal point of the development, as was envisaged by the indicative master plan. The housing mix proposed will provide for a wide range of house types and sizes, including bungalows, which will meet identified housing needs, whilst respecting the site's edge of settlement location. Proposal in terms of its layout, appearance, and scale accords with policies CS2, CS3, H4, and EV1. It is considered that the development provides formal and informal landscaped areas of open space and sustainable drainage features that will provide new habitats for wildlife, and the area of existing woodland is to be retained and managed in the long term. The development will be acceptable in terms of its impact on wildlife and accords with policies CS13, G2, ENV6, and the MPPF. The highway impact of this development, both on a standalone basis and cumulatively, is considered acceptable, and no objection is raised by the local highway authority. The proposal therefore accords with policy TR18 and paragraphs 108 and 109 of the MPPF. Notwithstanding the conditions on the outline permission, which are to be discharged separately in the event that the reserved matters is approved, the provision of a site-wide drainage strategy has been considered by the lead local flood authority and is considered acceptable. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out on page 27 of the report, with modifications to conditions 2, 3, and 5 as set out in the extras report. Members will be aware that a further late representation has been received today or late yesterday in respect to this application since the publishing of the extras report yesterday, which has been placed on the planning file and needs to be taken into account. In response to this, officers recommend additional modifications to condition 4 to make reference to the general permitted development order and removing such rights provided by that order, and deletion of the tailpiece to ensure the condition is more precisely worded. Removal of the tailpiece to condition 6 is also recommended, as such amendments to the approved details could be considered formally through the section 96A, the non-material amendment application, or section 73, material minor amendment application processes. It is requested that members give delegated authority to agree the final wording of conditions in the event that members agree with the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm now going to let the speakers commence speaking. The first speaker is Ms. Hack, so I'm about to allow you to talk, and I'll let you know when I set the timer. Can you confirm that you can speak, Katherine?
Hiya, yes, I'm here.
Yes. Okay, I'm just about to set the timer. Your time starts now. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking here today not only on behalf of myself, but also the many residents who object to this planning application. I object on the following grounds: loss of privacy. The initial outline plan, which was approved for 170 houses, details plans of bungalows. This revised plan that now cites large two-storey houses built on higher ground, which will overlook existing properties, thus impacting on privacy and light. I cite from previous comments made by the council in 2015, which resulted in the initial application P/13/1889/2 being denied. This is a greenfield site building into open countryside, which is located outside the built-up area of an identified service area and where no recognised local housing need has been identified. The development will have negative impacts on landscape and visual amenity. The proposal will not be an effective use of what is currently well-used, productive agricultural land. These reasons are still valid, and even more so as further developments have been sprung up in Cllr since then. Despite the applicant now proposing the secondary access route to be gained by knocking down someone's home, the site still has limited access to services and facilities. Even from the closest house to the secondary access will still mean a good 15-minute walk into the village and to the nearest bus stop, and that's assuming they are able-bodied. Additionally, please bear in mind that the potential impact this has on privacy, noise pollution and security for those living in number 92 and number 96 Ratcliffe Road, whose homes will now be more open to passers-by. A key part of the argument to refuse the application should be based on the 2016 Leicestershire County Council study, which demonstrated the following as overcapacity. The Mount Sorrel Lane eastbound King Street southbound. The report says that the Mount Sorrel Lane Barrow Road junction is a key junction in the middle of the village, as Mount Sorrel Lane is the only route that provides the centre of Cllr with a direct link to the A6. The delays and queues at this junction can have a detrimental impact on the working of other junctions in the centre of Cllr. Mount Sorrel connects with Slash Lane to the west of Cllr. Slash Lane is prone to flooding to a level which affects its its use by normal vehicular traffic. In such circumstances, Mount Sorrel Lane can be an alternative route for traffic instead of Slash Lane. Furthermore, when flooding occurs, Ratcliffe Road serves a key resilience function as part of a wider network of routes in the Soar Valley area, carrying an increased volume of traffic, including HGV traffic, and providing the main access to key services and amenities. It is abundantly clear that Cllr has a massive flooding problem. It has even made it onto national television. Myself and my partner own both 134 Ratcliffe Road and 136 Ratcliffe Road, and have seen water pouring through our garden, flooding foundations which need to be pumped out. It is not rocket science. Land acts as a sponge and natural flood barrier. To then build on this land will without question result in water not being absorbed and thus exacerbating the problem. The impact on the surrounding villages with all the associated extra traffic should also be considered, especially when main routes flood and traffic is diverted through such villages of Barrow and Soar, and the devastating flooding we saw in Cossington only a year ago. Again, I urge you to reject this policy, this planning application. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to bring the next speaker in, which is the agent Richard Henderson. I'm just setting the timer. Richard Henderson, your time starts now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Henderson, Planning Manager at Davidson's. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this Reserved Matters application, which is recommended for approval. The proposals will deliver a high quality and well-designed scheme which will provide much needed market and affordable houses, contributing towards the supply and delivery of housing in the borough, and provides for delivery of relevant Section 106 contributions and obligations towards local services under the signed agreement. The scheme provides a wide range of attractive 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bed houses and a number of 2-bed bungalows, both market and affordable, which are surrounded by extensive open space and play provision, along with an allotment area and cemetery extension. The application site and wider site overall represents a sustainable development that has excellent pedestrian linkage and which delivers high quality placemaking. Davidsons take pride in the quality of the product and the environment which we build. The proposals meet the terms of the outline consent and will provide for comprehensive development at the site. The proposals are entirely compatible in terms of size, scale, appearance and layout with the accompanying full application for housing, along with the farmyard redevelopment already approved at committee recently. The site will provide an attractive environment set against substantial open space and play provision, with a network of footpath routes, new allotments and a cemetery extension which will benefit the wider area too. Davidsons are fully committed to this site, and along with the affordable housing provider, we will deliver affordable and market homes in a sustainable and well-planned location. I respectfully request your support for the approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to allow the Parish Councillor, Councillor Julie Jones, to speak. I'll just... Oh, you've managed to turn your video on.
Oh, have I?
Okay, so your time starts now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Julie Jones and I'm a resident of Sileby and Chairman of Sileby Parish Council. I'm speaking today in my role as Chairman of the Parish Council. We are very concerned by the way the proposals are set out in 2 separate applications. Officers make the point themselves that the 2 applications are inextricably linked insofar as the layout of the site is concerned, and therefore, whilst they are separate applications, both are to be determined concurrently. The outline planning permission for the site as a whole describes the development as being for up to 170 dwellings, but also for, with associated open space, landscaping, extension to cemetery, new allotments, access, surface water attenuation, and associated works, including demolition of 94 Ratcliffe Road and conversion of existing farm buildings. Access only to be considered at outline stage. And that's outline planning permission P/17/1578/2. The wording of the permission is especially important because it sets out exactly what has been approved on the site as a whole. In effect, it sets out the framework for what the council was agreeing to be built on the site, up to 170 dwellings, etc. Put simply, by allowing both these applications to be approved, you are allowing a degree of latitude that was never envisaged when the outline permission was originally permitted. More specifically, you will be allowing more houses to be built on the site than was originally approved in the outline planning permission. The cumulative effect of the 2 permissions, if you approve both, will be to materially change the approved terms of the outline planning permission, because the development will no longer be for up to 170 dwellings. Condition 2 of the outline planning permission clearly states that the development it permits shall not be commenced until details, the reserved matters, of all of the following for that phase or parcel have been submitted to and approved by the LPA. That is absolutely clear. Each, all, and every phase, part or parcel of the land within the red line of the application site must be the subject of a reserved matters application, which must first be approved by the council before any part of the outline planning permission site can be developed. Condition 2 goes on to set out at points A to E what details are needed for each and every phase or parcel of land. The reason for having such a condition is quite simple. It's to make sure that you and the neighbouring residents get what you expected by way of the follow-up details and to make sure that those details comply with the overall vision for the site as a whole when you grant outline planning permission. In other words, it's to make sure that the OPP is developed in a comprehensive fashion in a way that doesn't deviate from what was originally approved. If there wasn't such a comprehensive overview provided by the OPP system, then we would end up setting a dangerous precedent to allow OPP to morph into something quite different to what we thought we were approving. It's a matter of fact that you do not have a reserved matters application for all of the development approved by the OPP. Instead, you have a reserved matters application for part of the site and a separate planning application for another part of the site. I'll pause there and continue my comments when we come to the next item on the agenda to discuss application 2162. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now turn to the next speaker, which is Councillor Cllr Paling. So, Councillor Paling, your time starts now. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, fellow councillors, officers, and thank you for giving the opportunity to speak as Ward Councillor for Salby. Basically, I'll be in the statement I'll be raising will cover items 1 for the outline planning permission for the 170 dwellings and item 2 for the additional 31 dwellings. Having been present at the original planning meeting for this application, it was then deemed only suitable for a total of 170 dwellings, and after a lot of cause for concern for this application, the planning committee, of which members of today's planning committee, some are still on that committee, asked for the advice of the Director of Planning, and if they were to approve this application, would it draw a line under this development? Can I please note that this meeting was recorded on the 11th of the 1st, 2018, and the agent for the development promoted the much smaller redesign scheme to reflect only 170 dwellings were to be built on this site as per the outline planning permission. Now we see an application for a further 31 dwellings. That represents an increase of an additional 18% to the original application that was scaled down to reflect only 170 dwellings in the approved outline planning permission. The additional 31 dwellings would substantially alter not only the scale, but should be looked upon as overdevelopment of this site. Also, the density of the 440 hectares and those extra dwellings are best not described as a windfall in this application. And this addition of a further 31 applications looks very similar to the numbers that the developer was seeking initially prior to the granting of the outline planning permission for the 170 dwellings. Can I also request and seek reassurance from the planning officers and the planning committee that the submissions and details that Annette Wade has made to Charmel Borough Council have all been considered and addressed, and the chair and members of the planning committee have received this information. The submissions are something of a concern for me, and I hope these will be considered in addressing appropriately prior to a conclusion on this application. Affordable housing. I would like to bring to the attention of the planning committee an email from Victoria Robb, Senior Development Management, East Midlands Housing Group, dated the 14th of August 2020 to Mr. Lewis Marshall. And clearly in paragraph 3 on the afford thing said, we note with reference has been made to the neighbourhood plan for Salby and the policy H4. It goes on to say, if this was to be adopted, it is neither practical or achievable under the affordable housing and will be extremely problematic for us in practical terms with the ongoing management and maintenance if the affordable units were to be required as distributed individually throughout the site. Can I please ask if this matter has been addressed and the letter has been seen by members of the planning committee as part of the planning application pack? Also going back onto what Katherine Hack said, This site is not serviced by any public transport. Okay, so all we're doing is increasing traffic issues and speeding. I cannot see any speed reduction measures included in this application. VS data supported by Cllr Parish Council shows speeds of up to excess of 80 miles an hour. Ratcliffe Road is quite a topical point with Charnwood Road safety and is subject on many occasions to speeding monitoring, and many fines have been issued. I would like to thank Cllr Parish Council, Annette Wade, Miss Hack for their contributions and comments on this application. Regards, Councillor Andrew Paling.
Thank you. There's been lots of points there raised. Can I ask Principal Planning Officer Lewis Marshall to come back and answer those points that's been raised? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go into specific points, I think it's important to obviously make members aware again that the principle of development has already been established on this site. It benefits from an existing outline consent whereby the impact on the wider transport network, flooding, ecology, sort of wider landscaping impact has already been considered and assessed as acceptable. And therefore, the reserve matters application that's before members tonight relates only to the landscaping, the layout, the appearance and the scale of the development. In terms of the comments of Julie Jones, again, in terms of it complying with the outline consent, again, this is covered extensively within the report on pages 16 and 17. It is entirely possible to reduce the site area of a reserve matters application. And obviously the reserve matters that is before members doesn't exceed the 170 approved by the outline. In terms of the comments made by Councillor Paling, yes, obviously the comments received late by Annette Wade are on the planning file. I believe that members have all seen them, and obviously they have been taken into account, as was iterated during the presentation. Councillor Paling raised a query regarding the neighbourhood plan policy in respect of affordable housing. Yes, this is considered again extensively on page 20 of the report. In summary, there is a policy within Sarby neighbourhood plan which requires or suggests that affordable units are dispersed throughout the site as individual units rather than grouped together. And the reason for that being it sort of fosters a more well-balanced and cohesive community, which the merits of the policy are recognised, but there is a caveat in that policy which allows the sort of deviation of that if it can be demonstrated that the registered affordable housing provider for the development isn't willing to take on the units in that form, which is the letter that Councillor Paling was referring to. So yes, that policy has been considered and addressed by way of that letter from the applicant via their affordable housing provider. And also Councillor Paling raised issues of speed reduction. The internal roads that serve the development are served by raised speed tables, so there is speed reduction measured within the development itself. And in terms of the sort of speeding along Ratcliffe Road that he referred to, obviously there is a roundabout proposed to access the development, which will be a natural measure of reducing speed of travelling vehicles along Ratcliffe Road itself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any members wishing to speak, if you use the raised hand function. But so far, I've got two members wishing to comment. I've got Councillor Tassell, followed by Councillor Grimley. So Councillor Tassell, you're first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the design of the houses and the property is absolutely brilliant. They're not just square boxes. They've got some design to them. They look good. There's only one query that I'd like clarification on, and that is Ratcliffe Road. Is it, what are the properties on Ratcliffe Road and the properties at the bottom of their gardens? It appears that the properties at the bottom of their gardens look to be like bungalows. What are the properties on Ratcliffe Road, please?
We can pass that back, please, to Lewis Marshall.
Yep. So Ratcliffe Road, or the rear of properties along Ratcliffe Road which adjoin the application site are typically semi-detached or terrace properties, which were many of which would have been previously council owned. As I said, they are all 2-storey. Where they adjoin development within the application site, yes, you're correct that there are 1.5-storey properties, and also the sort of most northerly corner of the site, which adjoins those properties on Ratcliffe Road, there is open space and a attenuation feature as well as allotments. So the proposed built development within the site itself has largely been moved away from the boundaries of those properties along Ratcliffe Road to reduce any impact on them.
Thank you. I find that can you hear me? This isn't working.
Yes, can hear you fine. Yeah, can hear you fine, Joan.
Thank you. I find that it's a very well laid out design and everything, and I would like to go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tassell. Do I have a seconder for that before we move on to Councillor Grimley?
Can I second that, Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Grimley. And did you still want to speak?
It's just really to pick up on the point the officer had made. It is an existing outline consent, and we are looking at reserved matters. So a lot of the wider stuff had all already been approved. I think it's frustrating that we're going to have to look at a second application with extra houses squeezed on, but that's not on this application. So and generally, again, I think the quality of the housing here is quite good. We've got a Davidson's development in my village. I did object to it, but the actual quality of the final housing was very good compared to other developers. So I think that's important.
Thank you for that. We don't have anybody else indicating wishing to speak. So it's been proposed by Councillor Tillotson, seconded by Councillor Grimley. I'm going to put that.
Councillor Tassell.
So sorry, apologies, Councillor Tassell. Jacqueline Jackson, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just to confirm with Councillor Tassell, she said officer recommendation. Can we just confirm that it's with the amendments that Lewis suggested at the beginning of his at the beginning of the item during his presentation?
Yes, it is.
You happy with that, Councillor Tassell? Thank you very much. And the seconder, Councillor Grimley, you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, there's still nobody indicating to speak, so I'm going to put that to the vote. I'll do that by roll call, so I'll read out everybody's names. If you can indicate for me, please, either for, against, or abstain. So I'm going to go through that alphabetically. So I'm going to start off with John Capleton. I don't believe Roy Campbell has joined us. Oh, Roy is. So Roy, if you're here and you've been here for the whole, I can't see a picture of you on here, but if you've been here for the whole item, you're eligible to vote. So Councillor Roy Campbell, are you for, against, or abstain?
I'm for, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Capleton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in for the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sandy Forrest.
I'm for the proposal, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hilary Fryer.
I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Grimley for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Howe.
Councillor Howe here. I've heard and seen the debate and I vote in favour of the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the application.
Thank you. Councillor John Savage.
Thank you, Chair. John Savage, I am for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Joan Tassell.
I'm for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Tillotson
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the recommendation.
and Councillor Emma Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also for the recommendations.
And myself, Councillor Ian Bentley, I'm for. So by my reckoning, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 for, no against and no abstains. But I'm just going to ask our legal representative here, Katherine Harrison, just to confirm those figures, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree. It was a unanimous vote in favour of officer's recommendation. So a vote of 13 for, no one against, and no abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, thank you. We're now going to move on to item 2, which is P/13. I can hardly read that. So P/19/2162/2 Davidson's Developments Limited, Peas Hill Road, Ratcliffe Road, Sileby. If I could ask the Principal Planning Officer again to step forward and read the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If we can have the slides, please. So yes, thank you, Chair. So for item 2, we are again at Peas Hill Farm, Sileby, and the application seeks full planning permission for 31 dwellings, which are to be situated within 3 land parcels inset from the reserve matters application that was subject to members' considerations under item 1. Next slide, please. So the red line shows the wider site area in which the outline planning permission for residential development was approved by the Plans Committee back in January 2018. The 3 land parcels highlighted in red show the location of the additional 31 dwellings proposed as part of this application. Should members be minded to approve the application in line with officer recommendation, the total number of units across the wider site would total 201 and they would consist of 2 consents which would be implemented alongside of each other. Next slide, please. So again, members will be familiar with the site layout, but for completeness, the 3 parcels of land subject to this application are edged in red. Whilst the separate application being inset from the reserve matters, it does form part of the wider site on which it would be reliant in terms of open space, access and drainage. Next slide, please. So in terms of what is proposed in more detail within these 3 land parcels, there are 31 dwellings, 30% of which would be affordable, which the affordable units are coloured in green and blue on the layout plan. The layout is based on the same principles of the adjacent reserve matters proposals and is designed in block form, fronting open space or the access road with some units served by private driveways. Next slide, please. And again, in terms of the proposed house types, the design on these 3 parcels is consistent with the adjacent reserve matters and consists of a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses, again, all in the more traditional style the developer is known for. Next slide, please. And the affordable units again consist of a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units. Again, are nicely detailed and not distinguishable from the open market housing. And the next slide, please. So key considerations for members. So in terms of the principle of development, the site is within the settlement limits of Sileby as defined by the neighbourhood plan. And there is an existing permission in place for the development of this site for residential purposes. The key consideration, therefore, is the additional 31 units proposed, and whether this would comply with the development plan. So policy CS1 of the core strategy supports small-scale development within the settlement limits. It is considered that an additional 31 dwellings is small-scale when you take into account the size of the wider development site and Sileby as a whole, and therefore accords with policy CS1. Policy H2 of the neighbourhood plan also supports windfall development where it is within the settlement limits and where it is surrounded by existing buildings. When taking into account the wider development site, i.e. the reserve matters, it is considered that the proposal accords with policy H2 of the neighbourhood plan. Notwithstanding the policies of the development plan, the NPPF also requires that development sites make effective and efficient use of land, and the additional 31 units proposed would make a positive contribution to the council's borough-wide need for housing, yet it would still remain a low-density, high-quality development. The provision of additional dwellings should be given significant positive weight. Like the Reserved Matters application, it is considered that the proposals relate to the built form and settlement character of this area of Sileby and would preserve amenity for existing residents and create a high-quality environment for future residents. The housing mix proposal will provide for a wide range of house types and sizes which will meet identified needs, whilst respecting the edge of settlement location. The proposal in terms of its layout accords with policies CS2, CS3, H4 and EV1, and this is on the provision that it will be delivered concurrently with the adjacent reserved matters on which the provision for open space, drainage and access is reliant. The additional 31 units would also have no greater impact considered alone or cumulatively with the wider site on ecology or heritage assets. The local highway authority have considered the impact of the proposed additional 31 dwellings on the capacity of the main access to Ratcliffe Road and the capacity of the wider highway network in Sileby, and is considered acceptable and no objection is raised. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out on page 55 of the report, to include the section 106 contributions which are considered to meet the relevant tests of the Community Infrastructure Levy regulations and also have been agreed by the applicant. And again, members will be aware that a further late representation has been received in respect of this application since the publishing of the extra report yesterday, which needs to be taken into account. In terms of the content of that late representation, further concern has been raised that there is not a condition that requires land levels to be approved. However, as was suggested in the extra report, the plan referred to in condition 2 as recommended includes not only details of finished floor levels, but includes the proposed topographic levels of the wider site, and is therefore sufficiently detailed to assess the application in terms of drainage or amenity, and is enforceable should the need arise. Therefore, no further conditions are recommended. Furthermore, in addition, the drainage engineering layout submitted as part of the application and has been considered by the Drainage Authority includes details of all land levels and details how surface water will be collected and directed around the site. Further concerns have been raised in respect to conditions 8 and 11, and the resident suggests that the condition or details approved part thereof would not be enforceable against future landowners. However, the enforceability of conditions and any details approved under those conditions would remain with the land itself and would not fall away should land ownership change in the future. Therefore, no alterations to conditions 8 or 11 are recommended. However, in order to be consistent with the Reserved Matters permission, it is suggested that condition 3 is amended to require the parking to be retained as opposed to maintained, and condition 5 be amended to delete the tailpiece. It is requested that members give delegated authority to agree the final wording of those conditions in the event that members agree with officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now go on to the speakers. The first speaker is Miss Hack. I'll just allow her to speak. Thank you. Miss Hack, your time now starts. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like the Planning Committee to consider the following points which supports my strong disapproval to the Reserved Matters application referred to above. The outline application, which was granted conditionally, has been completely ignored by the state of submission in the following principles. The addition of a further 31 houses is an 18% increase in the construction size for this site. This would increase the hard standing and roof areas from this site by a similar amount, adding to the flood problem which is already inherent in the village. Furthermore, I note that the Council's own strategic housing and employment land availability assessment states that the capacity of Peashall Farm is 170. The approved scheme defines the use of long gardens, giving space for existing hedgerows. Although the length of long gardens is never defined, a dwelling built within 5 metres of the boundaries of the existing properties does not constitute a long garden. I would also like to support what Councillor Paling referred to earlier, a reminder that during the planning meeting regarding the site on the 11th of January 2018, the planning committee, and I believe it was Councillor Bentley, I was at that meeting so I should know, sought the reassurance that if they approved this site, i.e. the 170 houses, that this would draw a line under further development in Sileby. The reassurance was given, and as you're well aware, these meetings are recorded, so please go back and listen to that. This seems to have been either conveniently forgotten, or and other planning applications would not even be considered. Aside from this, having read through as much as I can of the various submissions regarding these two applications, it feels as if the concerns of the residents and the parish council and the vision of the Sileby neighbourhood plan do not matter to either developer or planning officials. For every valid argument put forward objecting, there is some smart legal answer dismissing those concerns. To sum up, quite frankly, it is irresponsible enough to allow 170 houses, never mind trying to sneak a further 31 onto a plot. I urge this application be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now allow the next person, which is Agent Richard Henderson, to speak. Just reset my timer. Okay, your time now commences. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. As said previously, my name is Richard Henderson, Planning Manager at Davidson's. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this application, which is recommended for approval. The proposals will deliver a high quality and well-designed scheme which will provide much needed market and affordable houses, contributing towards the supply and delivery of housing in the borough, and will provide relevant Section 106 contributions and obligations towards local services. The scheme provides attractive 2-, 3- and 4-bed houses, which are to be surrounded by extensive open space and play provision, and wider residential development. The application site and wider site overall represents a sustainable development which delivers high quality placemaking. Within the context of the wider development, the application site satisfactorily accommodates an appropriate amount of residential development, given the extent of the overall land available, and the proposals clearly demonstrate this. The application site lies within the current outline consent area and within the settlement boundary of Sileby. The application does not result in any additional encroachment into the wider countryside to that which was envisaged under the approved outline consent. Davidson's have previously successfully delivered additional housing within similar sites already granted outline consent in other locations in the borough. This includes the recent development at Queniborough. The proposals are entirely compatible in terms of size, scale, appearance and layout with the accompanying Reserved Matters application. They integrate seamlessly with the wider site under the accompanying Reserved Matters application. Overall, the application site will provide an attractive living environment in a sustainable location set against substantial open space and play provision and wider development. Davidson's are fully committed to this site, and along with the affordable housing provider, we will deliver affordable and market homes in a sustainable location. I respectfully request your support for the approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now allow the next speaker to speak, which is Councillor Julie Jones of Sileby Parish Council.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh,
Karen,
right, okay.
Karen's on mute.
Okay, you can hear me. Can I just confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, hello, I'm Councillor Julie Jones, Chairman of Sarby Parish Council. Obviously, I won't repeat the comments I made for application 1683, but will continue to state condition 3 of the OPP makes it abundantly clear that one of the guiding principles for the development of the site as a whole is that there should be only up to 170 dwellings. That is the uppermost parameter of development that the OPP approves on the site as a whole, and it is a matter of simple maths that the OPP, 170 dwellings, plus the separate planning application, 31 dwellings, equals 201 dwellings, not up to 170 as approved. Condition 3 also states that the reserved matters application should include the retention and conversion of the existing farm buildings to use classes B1A, D1 or D2 uses. The point is, the original OPP for the site as a whole only ever approved up to 170 dwellings because that was what the council considered to be an appropriate level of development, having regard to the net developable area of the site, taking into account the need to also provide the other things that were approved, the open space, the landscaping, the extension to the cemetery, the new allotments, the access, surface water attenuation and associated works, and the conversion of the existing farm buildings. The officer report for the application for 31 dwellings conflates both applications and looks at gross / overall site area of the 13.32 hectare, which will obviously yield a much reduced density overall. When looked at in isolation, the standalone application for 31 dwellings, the density of approximately 42.5 dwellings per hectare, a bit different from the originally approved 12.7 dwellings per hectare, or increased density of 15.09 dwellings per hectare. In conclusion, this might be viewed as a cynical ploy by the developer to increase the amount of development on the site as a whole, and no matter which way you look at it, if both the reserved matters application and the separate application for 31 dwellings are approved, then between them, they will result in something materially different to what you originally approved when granting planning permission for up to 170 dwellings on this site. It cannot be right or legally correct for there to be more than 170 dwellings on the site as a whole when the council only granted OPP for up to that number. If you allow the applicant to step outside the carefully prepared framework provided by the terms of the existing OPP, then what's to stop them coming back in future and seeking a higher level, an even higher density of development by submitting a separate planning application for additional dwellings on another part of the site? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And the final speaker is Councillor Cllr Paling. I'll just allow him to speak.
Again, thank you for...
Let me reset my clock.
No.
Time now commences. Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you for giving the opportunity to speak. Just having listened to what the parish council have had to say, I am in total agreement wholeheartedly with that. Having sat at that application when the planning committee asked the head of planning, would 170 be acceptable? And we're now looking at an additional 31. It was never, the developer initially wanted just over 200. And if these 31 are granted permission, he will have got what he wanted. Also, Davidson's keep telling me about the high quality of the development, whatever. But again, I'd just like to point out that I cannot see anywhere in the proposals or whatever where any public transport bodies have been contacted in terms of providing a service for one of the furthest parts away from the village centre. And again, I'd like to just touch on a point that Katherine Hack spoke about, flooding issues. Whilst last year it was a record rainfall and global warming or whatever we put it down to, and it is a thing of the future that we are going to get more rain. Again, that does concern me, having dealt with one or two residents on Ratcliffe Road, and they were seeing their back gardens flooded, and those people have lived there for years and they've never experienced anything like it. And that rainfall was actually falling on open fields prior to any development being built. So again, that does concern me. And again, I think really I am disappointed that these additional 31 dwellings have come on the back of the 170. And I think it should have been treated as a complete separate development. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Cllr Paling.
Thank you for all those speakers' contributions. I'm now going to pass it back to Principal Planning Officer Lewis Marshall, who will reply to the points raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Just a couple of very, very minor points, as a lot of the issues raised have already been covered tonight and also are covered in the report. Sudbury Parish Council raised concerns that should members grant consent for the additional 31 as proposed, it could result in the developer coming forward with further applications for additional dwellings on the site. And obviously that's not the case before members tonight, and obviously if further applications did come forward at any time, we'd have to consider those on their merits at that time, but that isn't the proposal before members tonight, and that as a consideration shouldn't be given weight. Councillor Paling also raised concerns about the sort of transport sustainability of the site. Now, again, obviously the site benefits from an outline consent, and it has been considered that the site for 170 units is sustainably located. And again, I think officers of the view that additional 31 units is not going to be unsustainable. And again, it hasn't been objected by the local highway authority. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I've got four speakers wishing to speak. Councillor Grimley, followed by Councillor Tassell. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. As I said earlier, I do find it frustrating, these extra houses being tacked onto a site that's already been given outline planning permission for a lesser number. I'm looking for reasons for refusal. I mean, that the highways access, that would have been designed for 170 cars or 170 properties. It's now got to be is it now increased by another 31, another 18%. We've got the highways report on that doesn't object, which I find that well, that's up to them. But I'm a bit surprised about that. Whether they've not asked for anything else. Again, and just picking at the section 106 contributions, it's another frustrating thing. We have lost the surgery in the area, the East Goscott surgery, so the doctors have the patients for East Goscott are sharing between Syston and Sowerby, and that's more capacity on overstretched services. I'm not sure that a small 106 contribution is going to make any good. I'm going to reserve judgment on this. I'd like to hear what other speakers say.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Tassell, you're up next.
Thank you. Can I just clarify the fact that this 31 houses has not got outline planning? This is the complete planning this is the complete planning application, which includes the outline planning. It was not included in the 170 houses. So it is a brand new planning application that has just been slid in somehow. I'd like that answered. Secondly, I cannot remember seeing a street scene of the houses on these 3 plots of land. And I can't remember seeing any bungalows either. The houses didn't look quite as nice as the 170 type houses. I'm sorry to say that, but on the slides they didn't. Also, can you tell me, is this ground higher than the rest of the development? Are the houses on there going to stand higher? Is there going to be any means of, if it is there going to be any means of reducing the land height to make them look part of the development, or are they going to stick out like a sore thumb? They're the things that I just want answered, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tassell. I'm going to put that back to Principal Planning Officer Lewis Marshall. Mr. Marshall, if you'd like to come back, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Tassell. Yes, so in answering your questions, this is a full planning application for an additional 31 units. It would take the total number of units on the site to 201. There's an outline consent for 170. So yes, members are considering this application as a standalone full application. However, it is linked with the wider reserve matters site that you considered as part of the previous item. Within this part of the site, it is sited closest to the built edge of Sileby. So as you would expect, it is a slightly higher density within this part of the site. Again, there are no bungalows in this part of the site. They are within the wider reserve matters. And in terms of the land levels and the topography, the site does sort of slope up and cover part of the 3 parcels, but again, it does start to slope down again as you go towards the cemetery and also towards Ratcliffe Road. So yes, I hope that answers your questions.
No. Was there any slides of a street scene on these 3 parcels of land?
No, there was not a street scene for this particular parcel of land, no. But in answering your question about the house types, they are similar, and there is some overlap between the house types approved as part of the reserve matters with this particular full application.
Does that satisfy your questions for now, Councillor Tassell?
For now, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. In that case, can I call Councillor Campbell next, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, we knew then that the roads were at saturation point around Selby, and that's why we were reluctant to give permission for the 170 dwellings. And in my mind now, this extra 30 is just a straw that's going to break the camel's back around there. It's just too much, and I'm afraid I'm reluctant to go with officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forrest, you're next. Councillor Forrest, you're
yes,
next.
I'm there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share the reservations about this site. I too was at the original planning committee 2 years ago. I remember it was a long and complicated discussion, and we talked about the road problems, we talked about the flooding, we talked about the impact on other villages that is caused by, we have floods in the area. It was a very wide-ranging discussion. In the end, we gave planning permission, and I would think reluctantly, for 170 houses. I am really surprised to see tonight we are discussing an extra 31. I think it would be an overdevelopment of the site. And I'm also concerned about the impact on the schools. There are 2 primary schools in Cllr, and if I can refer you to pages 52 and 53, and this is where they discuss the developers' contributions, and an amount of £135,705 is allotted to improvements to capacity in primary education within 2 miles of the site. Now, this is the thing that gets me, where there would be an increased deficit in pupil places following the completion of the development. Does an increased deficit of pupil places in plain English mean the schools will be oversubscribed? There will not be enough school places. And if these, and then it says all schools identify fall within the catchment area of the application site and therefore is directly related in scale and kind to the development proposed. I take that to mean that 135,000, it can be divided between each of those primary schools. Well, it's probably about 100 and it's probably about 76,000 per school. Now that is a lot of money, but it won't build a school extension. It won't pay for the long-term hire of mobile classrooms. That disturbs me very much. I want to know where these children are going to go to school. And also, I have to say, the meeting 2 years ago, there was an extensive discussion about the congestion in Cllr, traffic. And we're told that the travel packs, 1 per dwelling, bus passes, but this is a red herring because there is a train station in Cllr, but if you're going to walk from this new development, that's a fairly long stretch and you're not going to do it with a heavy bag. If you're going to catch the train, you're going to drive. It's another car on the road. And also bus passes. I mean, I will stand to be corrected by those from Cllr, but I don't think there is a bus route on Ratcliffe Road. I think the buses go round the other way. I don't think I can vote for this proposal. Thank you for letting me have my say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. Councillor Mark Charles, you're next.
Councillor Charles, you're muted. You need to start again, please.
Mute. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Yeah, sorry. Back to what I was saying originally. The density development seems excessive. I also have a question. There are 31 units. I just wondered how many car parking spaces have been provided. I have seen a lot of sites where you end up with cars all over the pavements because there's no car parking spaces. Also, as this I think the ward councillor Andy Paling said, this is the furthest part of the development from the village, so I think people are going to have to travel to get there. So I also understand there's an issue with the public transport. So again, I asked the question as to how sustainable this proposal is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. We're going to pass that back to the Principal Planning Officer for comment.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just pick up on the parking query first. I don't have the exact number as in terms of how many parking spaces are being provided as part of the 3 land parcels, but the parking has been considered in respect of policy TR18 of the local plan, which requires a certain number of parking spaces to be attributed to a dwelling based on the number of bedrooms that it has. 2 and 3 bedroom properties have 2 parking spaces, and 4-bedroom properties have 3 parking spaces. And again, this would have been considered by the local highway authority, who have not raised an objection to the proposal. And again, there are conditions that require the parking to be retained in perpetuity, as to prevent parking being used for other purposes, which could then result in on-street parking. In terms of the sustainability of the location, again, this was considered as part of the outline planning application for the 170. There is a footpath link which provides better, more direct access from the site, particularly this part of the site, which is in the most northern corner of the site, which is closest to the rest of the village, which provides access to Ratcliffe Road. I don't believe there is a bus route on Ratcliffe Road itself, but I know that there is a bus route at the bottom of Ratcliffe Road where it meets the junction with Swan Street. So there is transport choice for residents should the application be approved.
Thank you. I have 2 speakers wanting to join us. Councillor Ward, you're next, but before we take you, can we take Jacqueline Jackson, please? So Jacqueline.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back as well on a few points of Lewis's. It's just to remind members, there's a lot of talk about what happened 2 years ago, and whilst that is right, we have to consider this application, which is a full application at the time under the current policies. So, you know, I do have to stress that to members. We also need to look at the harm. You know, we talked about the fact that members don't like this, but we need to establish and identify what harm is being caused by these additional dwellings. Obviously they are contained within the outline, so landscape is pretty minimal if the other parcels are going to be delivered. In terms of services, I think it's important to go back to the comments that we have received from the statutory parties. So we've consulted with the NHS and the CCG, and they have requested what they have requested. The Education Authority, whilst you are questioning whether that is sufficient, that is what the Education Authority has said is sufficient to meet the needs of this development, and they wouldn't have asked for that if they couldn't have been met. Similarly, the Highway Authority has not only considered the internal layouts and access, but they've also considered the wider sustainability and the wider highway network, and they haven't objected. So clearly, members need to be just mindful of those statutory consultation responses, and perhaps look at it objectively, this proposal objectively, against the proposals and against, you know, if you are identifying harm, how they fit in. And also members need to, obviously we have the core strategy, members do need to be mindful of the way we're going in terms of our 5-year supply. Whilst we have one at the moment, members will know that very shortly the council won't have that 5-year supply, so need to give the appropriate weight to the additional housing to meet that housing need. So I just wanted to add that in there as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Next up is Councillor Ward, followed by Councillor Tassell. So Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to echo the concerns of some of the other councillors that have spoken about this new application that's come in for the site that's already had outline planning permission. I hear what Jacqueline's just said, but I am unsure whether really the principle of development has been established, because there may be outline planning permission on the site, but as has already been said, that was established for a maximum number of houses that has already been granted. So really, this doesn't fit that principle of development. I'd also like to ask about the design of the houses on this new application. If these are supposed to be, as we're being asked to consider them, really an extension of the original application that was passed a couple of years ago, why are they not the same design as the houses that have been put in front of us for the previous application, because they are slightly different and they do appear to be of a slightly lower quality. And in terms of harm, I just wonder whether this is cramming more housing onto a site that's already had a maximum number determined for it. And I just don't know if I can vote in favour of this on the information we've been given so far. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Ward. Next up, I've got Councillor Tassell, followed by Councillor Fryer. So, Councillor Tassell.
Yes, listening to the comments and what have you, obviously we're not happy. There are still some people to speak, but I would like to propose that we refuse and go against the officer's recommendation on this. I feel that it's being pushed in. It's not being. It hasn't been thought out like the rest of the estate. And as Councillor Ward said, I picked up on the fact that the houses are not of the same calibre as the rest of the estate. So I would like to propose that we refuse this, providing we can find the reasons for refusing it that we need to.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tassell. Before we go on to Councillor Fryer, I would say you're absolutely right in that you've got to find some solid reasons for refusal. Personally, I can't see what they're going to be at this stage unless somebody can come up with something that the planning officers can work with. And I think we need to be very careful about doing this without solid grounds. But I'm going to take Councillor Fryer next, and after that, there is actually nobody else. Oh, Councillor Grimley's now actually put his hand up. But before actually I move on, is there a seconder for your proposal? Nobody's raised their hands, Councillor Tassell, so I'm going to take Councillor Grimley next. Sorry?
Chair, it's Karen speaking.
Karen, hello.
3 speakers, Councillor Fryer, Grimley and Tillotson. So Councillor Fryer is next to speak.
Yes, thank you for that, Karen. I'm aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just I've got a couple of questions, if I may. Figures have been mentioned about the density of the extra, these 31 houses, and a mention was made of 42%. And are we supposed to be looking at it at just the density of these houses, or do we look at the whole? Because I think it was mentioned in the original application and when we were discussing it earlier that the density here on this site of the 170 is about 12 to 13%. And I'm sure everybody realizes, but that's what you're talking about. When the officer can clarify, that's the number of houses per hectare. Bearing in mind that this council for many years had to approve 30 houses to the hectare, so I'd like clarification on that. I think also there was mention made that there is, for these 31 houses, should they be approved, there is some more flooding mitigation or SUDs going in, so I'd like that clarified as well, please. And then thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Fryer. Can I ask the Principal Planning Officer to come back on those points raised?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on a couple of points that have been raised by several councillors in respect of the house types. They form part of the same development, house type portfolio that the developer provides. I think there's a sort of disconnect between the previous presentation and the house types proposed as part of that, and also the house types proposed as part of this. I think it's important to point out that the house types on this particular application are within an area of the site which is being built at higher density, because it is closest to the existing built form of Sowerby, and therefore you expect to see smaller house types. There are more 2 and 3 bedroom properties in this particular part of the site. They're not the larger detached house types that I showed on the previous presentation. So yes, whilst they were different on the slides, overall they form part of the same portfolio, and arguably this part of the site will help contribute towards meeting sort of identified housing needs better when considered in the context of the wider site. In response to Councillor Fryer's queries regarding density, yes, so I calculated the density taking into account the total site-wide area, which was 13.3 hectares. So on the basis of 170 dwellings, it was just over 12 dwellings to the hectare. Taking into account the additional 31 units proposed as part of this application would increase the density across the wider site to just over 15 dwellings to the hectare, which is still very low density, bearing in mind a medium density is usually considered between 30 and 40 units. So as I said during the presentation, yes, it does propose an additional 31 units, but the outline consent proposed a very, very low density, and this will make more effective and efficient use of the land, which is advocated by the NPPF at a time whereby housing need in the borough overall is going to be reduced on account of our five-year housing land supply. And then just to pick up on the comment in terms of drainage as well, yes, so the LLFA have been consulted in respect of this application and the adjacent reserve matters application, and there is capacity within the studs features that are within the adjacent development site to cater for the additional 31 units proposed by this development. But as I said before, the two sites are inextricably linked. So the development of the 31 is reliant on the infrastructure to be provided by the reserve matters, and obviously because of that, we have incorporated within the recommendation a clause within the section 106 that would effectively prevent the development of this 31 units proceeding until such time that the infrastructure to be provided on the site adjacent has been delivered.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much for that. I've now got Councillor Grimley. You're up next.
Thank you, Chair. I did say that I don't like this development, but I can't really find proper planning reasons to refuse this. So I'm going to very reluctantly propose officer's recommendation with the additional revision to the conditions as mentioned earlier.
Thank you for that. As we haven't had a seconder for the proposal put forward previously, I'm now going to ask if anybody wants to second this proposal of Councillor Daniel Grimley. But before I do that, Councillor Tillotson wants to speak, followed by Councillor Capleton.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest that we asked officers whether overdevelopment of the site would be a sufficient reason for refusal, but we've just heard from Lewis Marshall that it wouldn't. Therefore, I agree with you, Chair, and with Councillor Grimley that I don't believe there are any reasons for refusing this application, and so I'm happy to second Councillor Grimley's proposal to support officer recommendation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tillotson. We've got one more speaker with hand raised. That's Councillor Capleton. Councillor Capleton, do you want to take the chair?
Yes, I was just going to second Dan's proposal as well, so I don't need to do that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Well, there's nobody else indicating they want to speak. So it's been proposed by Councillor Dan Grimley, seconded by Councillor Tillotson to go with officer's recommendation. I'm going to put that to the vote unless anybody else wants to say anything. Karen Brightman has just indicated to speak, so I'm going to let Karen Brightman speak now.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify that that recommendation included the changes to the conditions as per the extras and verbally set out by Mr. Marshall at the beginning.
Karen, thank you very much for that. I'm just going to go back to the proposer and the seconder. Can I ask Councillor Daniel Grimley if you're in favour of that?
Yeah, thank you. I thought I said I was, but I'm in favour of that. Thank you.
No, we were talking about the additional items that were raised by the officer.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, I'm in favour.
Okay, thank you. And now if we can go back to the seconder, Councillor Tillotson, are you in favour?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm in favour.
Right, thank you very much. Right, I'm going to put this now to the vote.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. So can we just clarify that Lewis Marshall asked for delegated authority to finalise the wording of the conditions, and I was trying to get him before when we were checking for opposition, but can we just check that we're happy to delegate authority from the proposer and the seconder?
Yes, thank you for that, Karen. Sorry, I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Daniel Grimley. You happy to delegate that?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to delegate that.
Sorry, Councillor Tillotson.
Sorry, I'm not sure what went wrong then. What was the question? I didn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to just ask Karen Brightman to come back in. She'll repeat what she just said to you.
Hi, yeah, it was, well, there were two bits to it. It was clarification about the amendments to the conditions as set out in the extras, and also delegated authority to make the changes that Lewis talked about, removing just editing the conditions.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy with that. Sorry.
Right, thank you. Well, before we go to the vote, I'm aware that this has been a very emotive issue. The way I see it, I don't think there's any grounds that could be given to support a refusal on this. But I'm going to go through the list of names I have here and call everybody out, starting with Roy Camsell. So if you can be clear whether you want to vote for, against, or abstain. Councillor Roy Camsell. You're against. Against, thank you. Councillor John Capleton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Sandy Forrest.
I am against the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Hilary Fryer.
I am for the application.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Howe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in favour of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour.
Thank you. Councillor John Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Joan Tassell.
I'm against it.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm for.
Thank you. And Councillor Emma Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Ian Bentley, I'm for. Okay, so by my reckoning, that was 9 for, 3 against, and 1 abstention. Can I just ask Katherine to confirm those figures for me, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree. It was a vote in favour of the recommendation with 9 votes in favour, 3 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much, Katherine. The time is now 10 to 7. I propose that we adjourn for 10 minutes for a comfort break, and we should be back here ready to go again at 7 p.m. at which time Councillor Hilary Fryer will be taking over as chair. Thank you.
Okay. Right, is everybody back? Do I see? No, who's not back? Sandy Forrest, Dan Grimley. Just.
Hilary, I am back.
Oh, you are. Sorry,
I am,
Sandy.
yes, yes.
You hadn't got your camera. Is someone putting them on?
Oh, hang on. I can. Oh, no. I cannot start my video.
Right.
Oh, I'm being asked now.
Okay. Have we got? Yeah, there you are,
Well,
Sandy.
you see.
We've got you now. Can't get away.
Yeah, I'm here also.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, folks, for being so punctual. Ian obviously has the power of command and gets us sorted again. And welcome now to the second half of the planning meeting. And we move straight away to item 3, which is planning application P/20/0587/2 23 Budden Lane, Quorn. And we have 3 speakers here, but I'll go straight away to the planning officer, Karen Brightman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I could just have the presentation. Item 3 on your agenda tonight is a planning application for the demolition of an existing 1.5-storey bungalow and its replacement with 2 detached dwellings. And the site that I'm taking you to is 23 Budden Lane in Quorn. Next slide, please. This shows you the site location. So encircled in red is the current bungalow and its garage there. And the garden that's associated with it. Next slide, please. Just a few slides now just to set the scene, mindful of the fact that we've obviously not been able to go out all together and have a look at it today. On the right-hand side there, circled in yellow, is the bungalow that's subject to the application. So the bungalow that it's proposed is demolished. So you can see Budden Lane there, quite narrow, no footways, quite a lot of trees and quite a sort of green, quite a serene surroundings. Next slide, please. This is travelling south along Budden Lane, so getting close to the property. So you can see it there again, circled in yellow on the right-hand side. Again, it just sort of shows you that it's a residential road, but it's one with quite a unique special character. Next slide, please. This is the property itself, standing outside looking at it from Budden Lane. Just gives you an idea how it sits with its surroundings. Obviously quite a lot of greenery at the front there. Next slide, please. And this is if we were walking along there, if we just walked past it and then turned round to look back up Budden Lane. So you can see there again, circled in yellow, the application site property on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. These next series of slides are sort of closer up pictures of the property. So this is the southernmost access into the property. It's at the moment it's got a traditional in-out access arrangement, and this is the southernmost of those. And the garage building, if you recall, that's shown on the site location plan that we looked at right at the start. Next slide, please. So this is the property itself. This is the other access point, which is the one further up Budden Lane, further north along Budden Lane. And you can see there it's a traditional sort of 1.5-storey building. Next slide, please. This is just closer up, just to show you again what the property would be like, and just to mimic as if we were walking around and we'd sort of walked in and had a closer look. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the back of the property. while we're on this particular slide, if you look at the patio windows and just see to the left of it, there's a children's slide, green slide. Just beyond, or just further left of that, and sort of between the house and the hedge, there's a small lilac tree. Just while we're here, just to clarify, that's the only tree that's proposed for removal. So I just wanted to point that out to you while we're on this particular slide. Next slide, please. This is a sort of close-up of the boundary with number 21 Budden Lane. And the reason I've put that in there is because number 21 is the property that's closest and has the potential to be most affected by the proposal. Next slide, please. Again, these are a couple of shots of the existing house taken from the garden, just to give you the flavour of how it is now. Obviously, again, as I say, it's a 1.5 story property, dormer window on one side and a fairly large garden. And if you look at the left-hand side of the two pictures, you can see a sort of quite a nice, neatly clipped hedge. That's the boundary with number 21. Next slide, please. This is just a shot of the garden. Again, you can see straight in front of you there the boundary with number 21, which is obviously the closest property, and another sort of outbuilding down at the bottom of the garden, a relatively recent flat roof garage construction. Next slide, please. This is number 21 itself, and I've just included it to give you an idea of the relationship between the two. You'll see a large tree there on the left-hand side. It's my understanding that that's gone, so that isn't the tree that's proposed for removal. It's the one that we saw on the earlier picture, because this one, I must apologise, is one that I've taken off Google Street View. Next slide, please. This is the dwelling as existing, so pretty much shows you what we've already seen in real life. Next slide, please. These are the dwellings that are proposed. Members just need to bear in mind that this particular elevation isn't a street scene, so it doesn't show greenery at the front of the site. It presents the very urban impression, which needs to be considered in the context of what you've just seen and in the context of where the dwellings are located on the site. Next slide, please. And this is the site plan. So you'll see, and I've put the properties again just at the bottom there, just to remind you. But you can see from this, the current in-out access is divided up. So each property would have its own access in and parking spaces. So they've each got an integral garage, and then there's some parking and turning at the front as well. The greenery that's already there, including the hedge and the trees, largely retained. There'd obviously be some changes to widen the accesses slightly, but the concept is that it retains that feel that is so unique to Budden Lane itself. And you can just see number 21 there at the top of the slide, just to give you your bearings in terms of how close that property is. That's the bungalow that we've just looked at. And also in grey on that boundary is the outline of that lilac tree. If you remember that I talked about earlier, that's the tree that's proposed for removal. Next slide, please. This is plot 1, which is the plot that if you're standing looking at it, it's the one on the left-hand side. So it's the one that's furthest away from number 21. It's also the larger of the two properties. You'll see there are some windows in the side elevations, but all those that are first floor windows are generally to ancillary rooms such as bathrooms, just for your information. Next slide, please. This is plot 2, which is the smaller of the two. It's also the property that is located closest to number 21. Again, it's got some windows at first floor level in the side elevations, but once again, these are only to bathrooms. And it's also a recommendation on the on the report that you'll have seen that we put a condition on that there are no further windows added to either of the side elevations of either property, and that those that are there are obscure glazed. Next slide, please. Turning to the main points which are set out in the committee report, so I don't want to go into them in any great detail. But in terms of principle, obviously it's Quorn, it's a service centre within limits to development. It's an existing residential site. There would be a gain, obviously, of one additional dwelling on the site. It's important to bear in mind that Quorn also has its own neighbourhood plan. And the neighbourhood plan for Quorn also sets out limits that this development would be within. So in terms of the actual principle of having an additional house on that plot, there's nothing in any of our development plan policies that would say that's a no. We obviously also have to think about mix. These are two large 5-bedroom properties, and that needs to be kept in mind. Policy H3 of the Quorn local plan does support smaller properties, so it's fair to say that this particular proposal doesn't gain any support from that. However, it's not directly in conflict with policy CS3 in the core strategy, which has a similar aim, but also seeks to reflect the character of the surroundings, and it has some recognition that maybe in areas where it's already low density and the character of the area is such that larger properties may in fact be more in context. So it's our view that actually it complies with CS3. Turning to design, obviously this is a design as ever is a subjective thing. It's a judgment, but officers' view on this is that given the context of the area, there are a lot of properties. They're all very individual, very unique. Budden Lane's got its own special character. These particular properties don't distract from that. In fact, they reflect a property further up the road, number 11, which has got a very similar design ethos to it. Materials, chimneys, detailing, all of those things have been designed and come about in a way that reflects the village design statement. The applicants obviously looked at that and taken some cues from there as to things that are important to Quorn. It's also important to note that the built form is generally away from the boundaries and that a lot of landscaping is retained. So it's our view that overall these dwellings will fit in with that surrounding context. Turning to amenity, in terms of the actual size of the plots, because the rear gardens are pretty deep, they're both in excess of 21 metres, there'd be no impacts on any properties to the rear. There's sufficient distance there. Cllr Road, obviously, again, we've also looked at, but those properties themselves have gardens that are approximately 21 metres in length, which means that any side elevations facing onto there would be well in excess of the SPD requirements for 12.5 metres. As I touched on earlier, it's quite possible, and in fact it's recommended, that we put a condition on that there are no additional windows and that obscure glazing is used in any first floor or above windows in the side. So that would prevent any overlooking of those gardens. Number 21, obviously the closest neighbour. The plans have been amended to reposition the plot that's closest, plot 2, and that was actually moved further back into the plot because it was recognised that there was the potential for loss of light to a bedroom window at the front of number 21. Since that plot has been repositioned, there are no longer any impacts there that are of concern in terms of meeting our SPD. And again, with a condition around the side facing windows, there'd be no loss of privacy as a result of the as a result of the proposal. It's also suggested in the conditions that a condition is attached that there are no extensions without a planning permission, so withdrawal of permitted development rights, just to ensure that there aren't any large-scale extensions that could go on to impact particularly on that particular neighbour. Highways and parking, yes, Budden Lane is a narrow road, but we are talking about one additional dwelling, so it's not considered that there would be an issue in terms of highway capacity. Parking is provided for both properties in line with Highway Authority guidance and our own policy TR18, so there's 3 spaces for each of the dwellings. So our conclusion is that there isn't a reason to object to the planning application on that basis. Flooding, it's within flood zone 1, so typically there's no risk to the property of flooding. In terms of looking at whether this particular development would cause flood risk elsewhere, it's an existing residential property with existing drainage in there, but nevertheless we do suggest that there is a condition attached that details of surface water and foul water disposal are provided, so that we can ensure that that's done in the right way. And finally, in terms of the officer report, biodiversity and landscape, as I think I've touched on earlier, there's very little loss of landscape. There will be some, but it's to a relatively small degree, and it's within the context of the street scene, so it's not something that we would consider to be visually harmful. The biodiversity of the site itself, it's a residential garden. It's not likely to have a particularly strong biodiversity contribution. Residents have raised, and I'll touch on this as I'm going through the extras, but residents have raised the possibility of bats, and has that been looked into? There's nothing to suggest that there would be bats on this site. However, it is important to remember that there is other legislation, and if a bat or anything suggesting that there were bats on the site was discovered, then obviously development would have to stop, and appropriate licenses would have to be gained to do that. So that's that on the committee report itself. There is also an extras item that I just need to draw members' attention to, and that's in connection with some responses that we had to the committee report. Just bear with me, I'll just remind myself what those were. So the main issues there were to do with the way the report was written. So there was a reference to a main road in the report. That was a descriptive thing only. So there's not any need to amend the recommendation as a result of that. We've talked about the residents' comments about bats, and we've also talked, if you remember when we went through the slides, we talked about the tree that had previously been removed. So just reiterate that that isn't part of this application. That's something that had already happened, and that tree wasn't subject to any protective order or anything that would mean that the council had to be notified of its removal. And then just finally, because of the amended plans, there is an error on the committee report. It's at the top of page 63, and it's talking about the measurements for plot 2, and it does say in the report that there's a 2-metre gap to the northeast boundary. Because of the changes to plot 2, that's now 900 millimetres to that boundary. So I just wanted to point all those out to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the speakers. And if I may go to Karen Woodison to introduce them and bring them into the meeting, please.
And thank you. So our first speaker is Rebecca Cooper, an objector, I'll just allow her to speak. Okay, Rebecca, your time is about to commence, so if you can start speaking now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Rebecca Coop and I'm speaking on behalf of other residents who will be affected by this build as well as myself. In the design section of the Planning Committee report, paragraph 4 states that large dwellings are set back from the main road. We note the recent comments made in the extras report, but would like to emphasise that Budden Lane is a small single track road with soft verges and without pavements. The lane is leafy, a designated public bridleway leading to open countryside and a well-used footpath leading on to Woodhouse Eaves. It is an amenity enjoyed by the community, dog walkers, families with young children and horse riders and joggers. It has always been very popular because of its unique and distinctive semi-rural character that provides us with trees, hedges, birds and wildlife. It is not in a conservation area, but its character needs to be safeguarded and not eroded or harmed by inappropriate development. The plot has already had 2 mature blue cedar trees removed recently, which would have provided a home for many species. We live at the end of Cllr Road and our neighbouring property to number 23. We ourselves have found evidence of bats within our own living roof spaces. In the Quorn neighbourhood plan, the version prior to adoption by Charnwood Borough Council, part of Budden Lane is shown as a site of local biodiversity importance. Policy EN3 and EN4. A conservation area adjoins the back gardens on Budden Lane and contributes to both the wildlife of both. Quorn is short of established trees and natural green areas, and they are influential in considering any future development. In the past, planning permission has been refused for development in a front garden on the south side of the lane because it is harmful to the visual amenity and character of the area. The planning documents quoted in the report place emphasis on the importance of a new development respecting and enhancing local character. This is covered in the design supplementary planning document adopted this year and barely mentioned in the report. The proposed development does not respond to the context of its surroundings on Budden Lane because of the scale, height and density of this design, which impacts on the street scene and character of the lane. There are many large properties on Budden Lane, but none are in such close proximity to each other. There is no plot of comparable size to the development, approximately 1/3 of an acre, holding more than one substantial dwelling. The development is out of harmony with its Budden Lane surroundings and will dominate the neighbouring bungalow at 21 and the part of the lane where it's situated, which at the narrowest point on the lane is only 9 foot in width. The roof height of the plot 1 is 28 feet 7 inches and the southwest flank wall is a massive 58 feet, over twice the 3-storey height. This illustrates a huge scale of one of these substantial dwellings. We have a mix of buildings on Budden Lane and they complement the lane, respecting its character. This development does not. It's too dense for the size of the site and has a powerful, prominent, overbearing impact, which will be hard on the eye. Appendix 1 of the design supplementary planning document makes reference to parking. It states that frontages dominated by a large expanse of tarmac should be balanced by appropriate soft landscaping. Hedging and vegetation will remain because of the proposed large driveways and the new wide sweeping entrance to plot 1. The additional removal of side bushes at plot 2 combined with the extensive tarmac surfaces means that the impact on the lane will be magnified, resulting in a hard landscape and unsympathetic street scene. The overbearing dominance of the development does not respect or enhance the lane's character and thus contravenes the following policies. CS2 and EV1, which state that mass, scale and layout are essential considerations and should be compatible with the area's character. ENV4, it has a disregard for the natural soft landscape. The essential nature of Budden Lane arises from its significant trees and hedges. The National Planning Policy Framework, the development is not sympathetic to the local area, and the Quorn Village Design Statement, the design is unsympathetic and inappropriate to the Budden Lane. It does not enhance the character of the area. CS3, the proposal does not meet CS3 policy and is out of character because it is not on one large dwelling on one large plot. As a village amenity, Budden Lane should be preserved and its character not eroded by inappropriate developments like this one, which urbanises the lane, does not protect the verdant appearance of the lane, and is not sympathetic to the street scene and semi-rural setting. The overdevelopment of the site...
Time is up. Please wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now, thank you, Rebecca. We'll now go on to the next speaker, which is the agent, Jonathan Weeks. Let me just reset my timer. Jonathan, your time commences now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you. Yes, my name's Jonathan Weeks. I'm the agent for this application, and it's been submitted to you following positive pre-app advice with the council for the redevelopment of this land for 2 dwellings. The advice contained within that pre-app response on design was taken forward as part of this planning application. We've then, during the course of the application, there's been further work which has been undertaken in unison with the council, such that the scheme before you has been refined by your officers. A high quality scheme has therefore been brought to you with a recommendation for approval. This application is looking to provide 2 dwellings at a density of about 15 dwellings per hectare, so it's still low density, on an existing parcel of land within Cllr, a sustainable settlement where housing is directed. The site does not form part of the conservation area. The existing house, which is 1.5 stories, is not of any particular merit, and there are no protection orders on the trees, as we've already heard. The proposed replacement houses, which have been designed to allow the existing vegetation to be retained, particularly at the front of the site, with the exception, the only vegetation coming out is the one small tree, which is set back behind the house. It's ensuring that these 2 dwellings will maintain the verdant appearance on the street. The principle of the development is therefore fully in accordance with the development plan. The new buildings will both have a street frontage to follow the pattern of properties along Budden Lane, and this includes the ridge heights, plot widths and plot sizes, which are comparable to other properties along the northern side of the highway, where there have been a number of other infill plots, and the plots themselves are generally narrower and the buildings are placed closer together. The subdivision of one of the larger plots on this highway to mimic the more common characteristics of the northern side of this highway is not therefore out of keeping or contrary to policy. The design of the dwellings along the road, as has been said by everyone, are varied. This enables bespoke new properties to be assimilated into the street. The 2.5-story design with the top floor set within the roof allows an efficient use of the internal spaces, whilst the composite building form and appropriate detailing to the elevations break up their mass. Design is to a degree subjective, but the elevations have been worked up with your council officers such that they are considered by your own planning professionals to accord with the council's Good Design SPD and the Quorn's Village Design Statement. The position of the buildings on the site provides clear glazed windows above ground floor only on the front and rear elevations. It's obscure glazed windows to bathrooms and en-suites on the side elevations. No loss of privacy will therefore occur to the neighbours. Additionally, the large size of the plot ensures that the spacing of the new properties to all the dwellings surrounding it exceeds the council standards. It also comfortably complies with the BRE 25-degree line for the assessment of daylight. The buildings are therefore not going to have any overbearing relationship due to the separation distances and the retention of the boundary vegetation. And as I said, additional landscaping and planting will be going in as part of this scheme. The 2 trees which have been referred to by Miss Cooper as being removed from the site, they were removed actually following advice from a tree surgeon who was actually on the site. So they've not been taken out as part of this application. They were taken out 2 years ago upon the advice of a professional for safety reasons. In terms of obviously the relationships to other properties in the street, just as a reminder, because I know some of the neighbours have been complaining about the fact they will be able to see the buildings, particularly the side gable of plot 1 from their gardens. There is no right to a view from a planning perspective, but as already just indicated, the separation distances and vegetation which is retained ensures that it will not appear overbearing or over dominant. So it is therefore hoped that you will be able to follow the recommendation of your professional officers in supporting this proposal to create 2 new dwellings. just to come back on a couple of other little points as well, which was made, sorry. I can confirm I've just spoken with the client. There are no bats in the building, and there are no bats which are roosting any of the trees or anything like that. But obviously, if during construction anything is picked up, as was indicated by Karen, they are covered by other legislation. But there's nothing to suggest that there are actually any bats on there. And just one other point in terms of the materials for the driveway and things, that hasn't actually been specified at this stage, but tarmac is not the intention to be used. It would actually be a much softer paving, which is intended to be used at the front, so that you do actually have a much more attractive frontage of the materials and the way in which the area in front of the buildings relates to the street. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And we'll go on to the next speaker now, which is the ward councillor, Councillor Richard Shepherd. I'll just allow you to speak. Thank you. Councillor Shepherd, I'm just going to set my alarm, so you have 5 minutes from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of my fellow ward councillor, Jane Hunt, as well as myself. At the heart of a decision about this application lies the Borough Council's Design Supplementary Planning Document, the DSPD for short, which we adopted in January of this year. The decision should respond to the first of the design principles for Charnwood in that document, and that principle is, quote, respecting and enhancing the local character, end quote. The document says, an important aspect of good design is the ability to contribute to the distinctiveness, and that word is in bold in our document, the distinctiveness of an area. A good understanding of the individual site context and its surroundings is vital. Now, Budden Lane's distinctiveness features dwellings, often large dwellings, within large plots. And you saw in one photograph, the 1.5-storey dwelling supposed to be demolished in a big plot. And the result is in Budden Lane, there's a pleasant proportional relationship between dwelling and house plot. Now, that relationship would be destroyed by the demolition of that one dwelling you saw and the erection of 2 new large dwellings on the same plot, positioned as they would be. A condition is proposed to remove permitted development rights. Now, in another location, that would be unremarkable. But in this location, it shows that a building is being squeezed onto a plot, which is completely not the character of Budden Lane. As you go down the lane, you see on your right Woodbine House, number 11. Now, directly left of Woodbine House, as you face it, is a large, open, expansive garden. So Woodbine House does not in any way look squeezed in. And then if you walk on to the end of the lane, beyond where the photographs you were shown take us, the end of the lane, you'll see 3 quite new houses, but they're generously spaced and with a large grassed area and extensive drive in front of them. They're a development in keeping with the generous spacing in the lane. That DSPD of ours refers to mass or bulk as a design matter with an impact on the street scene. It says inappropriate development massing may lead to an assortment of problems beyond aesthetics, such as overbearing impact. Now, given the nature of Budden Lane, that impact will be felt by passers-by and neighbouring properties. You've previously heard from another speaker, reasons for refusal, and I agree with those, but I want to focus on our DSPD because we've agreed as a council that to assess proposals in their immediate local context. That extras paper referred to about the amended plans came on the 19th of October, just 2 days before they published the agenda. Successive amendments have not resolved that basic problem of too much on that plot. And if you think about that photograph we saw of that 1.5-storey dwelling in a big plot in the nature of Budden Lane, that's it, one dwelling on that big plot, replace that by the 2 large dwellings you saw proposed, and that is not in the distinctive character of Budden Lane. So we've agreed our first principle of design, quote, respecting and enhancing the local character. And so by our standards, the application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody. I'd like to go back to Karen Brightman to see if she would like to respond to any of the points raised by the three speakers.
No, there's not really an awful lot to say. I mean, obviously, in terms of looking at whether something is in context with the area, it's absolutely correct, as speakers have pointed out, that that is something that is incumbent on us to do as part of reaching a decision on this. And there are no hard facts there. There's no, it has to be this distance, or it doesn't, or it should be this. It's a judgment, and it's a balanced one. So I don't think I can really add to that. It's something that I think people have got to make their own minds up on, if you like.
Thank you very much. I have two speakers, Councillor Bentley and Councillor Grimley. Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I don't think there's any mention about work times at this address. If it were to be passed, I'd like to suggest that there should be no working on Sundays, bank holidays. The times perhaps should be limited from, say, 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 p.m. And perhaps no deliveries to site outside of the times 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Other than that, the first speaker suggested that the height of one of the properties was 58 feet, which would make it almost as tall as a small block of flats. I don't think that was probably accurate. My personal view on this is that I think that these larger houses, okay, there might be 2 of them on this one site, but there is a lot of large properties in this area. I think they look quite acceptable, and as such, I'd like to go with officer's recommendation, adding on to that the delivery times and working times as I've suggested.
Thank you very much. I did say that Councillor Grimley wanted to speak, but I see that Jacqueline Jackson would like to speak as well. So before I ask for a second and go to Councillor Grimley, Jacqueline, did you want to bring something forward? I can't hear you, I'm afraid, Jackie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, just quickly about the working hours. As members will be aware, we've had a directive from the government in response to the COVID, asking members and planning authorities in general to think very carefully regarding the control of working hours. In fact, they've provided a new application which will allow, if a development is restricted, for it to be fast tracked to allow in longer hours. So, you know, I would err against that. It is a residential area, but we see that all the time on infill plots, and there is other legislation. So bearing in mind that central government advice, you know, I just have to raise that with you.
Thank you very much. I'll go back to Councillor Bentley, if I may, before I go on to Councillor Grimley. The other point I would only make on that, as we have seen, that road is so narrow that I would be concerned that if it were unlimited working hours, that it would cause immense disruption to other people trying to get in and out of their properties during working hours to get and school. You can't get 2 cars side by side, and we've got lorries delivering, but we take your point, Jacqueline, and I'll just go back to Councillor Bentley if he wanted to add anything, and then I'll move on for a second, and then Councillor Grimley, Councillor Tassler and Howe. Councillor Bentley, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I wasn't aware of the central government thoughts on this matter. However, I completely agree with Councillor Fryer that given the sensitivity of this location, I think that the working hours as I have asked for, should be in addition to the recommendation on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now move to Councillor Grimley. Oh, sorry, do I have a seconder for the proposal by Councillor Bentley? Not at this time. Councillor Grimley?
Thank you, Chair. I've not got necessarily a problem with the size of the plots on the development, and I'm not overly happy about the design. I don't think it looks, the way you look at the property that was there, it doesn't really sort of strike as being in context as to what was there, and I'm not particularly keen on that design, but I'll hear what other councillors have to say.
If I am muted. Councillor Camsell?
Hello, Chair. Yeah, thank you. I'm just a bit concerned about the bats. Was there a bat survey taken? Can I ask officers that, please?
No, there hasn't been a bat survey undertaken.
Sorry. So we just take the word of the developer that he stuck his head in the loft, then had a quick look round, and we believe him. Then is that how we carry on?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily ask for one on everything. So we obviously have to make an assessment as to whether we think that there's a particular habitat or protected species likelihood on a site, because bat surveys are obviously quite expensive. But clearly, if somebody was to start work there and there was evidence of bats, then that's a separate legislation covers that. So they would have to stop immediately. But yeah, it's not something we ask for across the board on all developments.
Well, I'd just like to say it looks pretty good habitat for bats to me. And just a word to the residents, if when they do start knocking it down, if you see bats flying about, please ring up English Nature and get the job stopped, like I did at Warwick Way when McDonald's demolished a bat roost. Thank you.
Councillor Tassell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 5-bedroom houses on this very, very narrow lane. It could be up to 5 vehicles. They've both the houses appear to have single garages. Not that people use garages nowadays very much. They leave the houses outside. Is there enough parking space for up to 5 houses per property? Or are they going to spill over onto the lane itself, which is, as we have all noticed, is very, very narrow?
Councillor Howe?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. I've got some sympathy for the people opposed this, but I can't see any real grounds for opposing it. But I take Councillor Bentley's point. I mean, I've had 2 houses constructed opposite me, and I regularly go down Budden Lane, and I think the construction traffic, you know, we need to consider putting some provision in. And I should imagine, based on my experience, they're going to cause substantial damage to the grass verges all the way down that lane if you're getting heavy lorries down. So I think we ought to, you know, consider a provision for that. Thank you.
Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like other people on the committee, I know Budden Lane quite well, and I would want to say that it is a lane. It's very rural, it's very rustic, it's very countrified. There are no footpaths either side. Cars come up and down, of course, lots of pedestrians and dog walkers to access the fields, and of course horses as well. Horse riders are regular users of this lane. So if we are going to grant permission, I think we must be mindful about construction traffic down there. But I have to say, I have concerns about this development. I think these two large houses on this site is an overdevelopment of this site. I think one large house set a little bit further back on the site would really enhance Budden Lane, but just two houses squashed in like this, it doesn't attract me at all. And I hear what Karen says, and I agree with her. Design, aesthetics, it's a question of personal preference, of taste, but I can't say I like the design of these two houses. I don't think they do anything. In fact, I think they harm the character of Budden Lane. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I saw an officer, but before I move to Councillor Charles, Karen Brightman, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back in on the construction traffic point and point out that if members were minded to approve, we maybe could have a condition that was crafted in such a way that it wasn't an out and out restriction on working between certain hours, but we could certainly look at a sort of construction management plan that might look at where people park and what times deliveries and that sort of thing took place. So it was just to add that, and also to respond on the parking and to point out, I think Councillor Tassell asked about parking. There is parking at both properties that meets with the provisions set out in the Highway Authority's guide and our own policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I have got you marked, Councillor Charles, but as Councillor Bentley proposed put forward a proposal, he has indicated he would like to speak, and then if he would like to speak, because he may be amending his proposal in some way, then I'll go straight to you, Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's a good idea as proposed by Karen Brightman. I'd be happy to change to go with a construction programme as designed by the borough, which would have the same effect of protecting the amenity of the neighbours during construction.
Thank you. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'd like to agree with the comments of Councillor Forrest. I do find that this proposal will have an overbearing impact on Budden Lane. I think if we were looking at a development of a larger single house on that site, I don't think that I'd have an issue with that. But this does appear to be, forcing two properties onto one site. I don't know whether it's quite right or not. Also, I just wondered, are we setting some sort of precedent for this type of development along here? Because obviously there are one or two other quite large bungalows along there that possibly might go the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacqueline Jackson, you wanted to come in?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't going to answer that question, but I will do as soon as I've come in. Precedent's a hard one. Every application has to be considered on its own merits. So, if another application was submitted on those same to do that, members and officers would have to consider that at the time. So that's what I'd say. Just coming back, I felt a little bit uneasy with some of the comments earlier on. Design is subjective. Obviously, officers have set out their views quite clearly in the reports regarding design, but it's at Plans Committee for members to make those judgments themselves. They're the people making the decision. So, that is open for members to consider. But in terms of precedent, obviously, we don't really talk about precedent, but we would have to consider all applications, whether this one was accepted or not. If another application came forward, you'd consider it at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Forrest and Councillor Charles. On balance, I think this is too much on this site. It's overbearing, and my feelings were very much either one, large house or 2-3 bedroom detached would be much more acceptable on this site. So on balance, I don't believe I shall be supporting it.
Right, well, we're in an interesting position now. We haven't got any proposals for, against, or anything. We had a proposal. I do apologise, Councillor Bentley. We don't have a seconder. If I see no hands going up, oh, Councillor, I've now got hands. Councillor Savage.
I'd like to second that proposal for the officers' recommendations. I think they're two lovely properties, and I think they'll enhance the lane.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Savage. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to propose we go against officer's recommendation for overdevelopment of site. I just think it's too much. These two houses there, it's just greedy.
Right. So I'm going to. You want to refuse it on the grounds of overdevelopment, Councillor Lowe?
That's correct, Chair.
Right. So, Councillor, I've now got hands going up on them. I just want to clarify one thing with the officers. We've had a proposal for to accept officers' recommendations, which has been proposed and seconded. We've now had a proposal for it to be refused against officer on the grounds of overdevelopment. Do I take them in the order that the proposals have been given to me?
Yes, Chair, you'd need to take the votes in order. Obviously, for a refusal, there needs to be some debate regarding the precise reasons, really, and policies, and we need to go into that, which officers are happy to help you with, but you might want to take the first proposal first before we do that.
All right. Councillor Tassell, you have your hand up.
I was going to second Councillor Lowe in his proposal.
Right. So we take the first proposal first, which was to accept officers' recommendation with the addition of a construction management plan as outlined by the officers. Councillor Bentley.
Chair.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Could I just ask before we commence with the vote, just to confirm that that proposal includes the delegation of the wording of that additional condition?
Councillor Bentley has nodded. Councillor Savage, are you happy for the wording to be decided? Yes, he has put his thumb up to me. So, Councillor Bentley.
Yes, for, Chair.
Councillor Campsell.
Councillor Campsell against, Chair.
Councillor Capleton.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Charles.
Councillor Charles against, Chair.
Councillor Forrest.
I'm against, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm against.
Councillor Howe.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Savage.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tassell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm against.
Thank you. And Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Against.
Thank you. And I was going to vote for. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 9 against. Could I have confirmation from our legal people, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with you and confirm that the proposal was rejected with a vote of 4 in favour of it and 9 against and no abstentions.
So as that has gone, the voting has gone to refuse that application. I'm not sure that we need to take the other one because we've already refused it. So
No,
we now.
no, sorry, Chair. You need to take a vote. Nothing's been decided at the moment. The application is undecided. We don't know that the next one will be allowed. We do need to, perhaps the officer could provide some advice though on potential reasons and we could debate the reasons for the refusal as part of the proposal in more detail.
Thank you. So I'll move back to Karen.
Yeah, in terms of looking at a reason, from picking up on what people have said, I think it needs to go a little bit further than just saying overdevelopment. So we probably need to, or you'll probably need to think about something that says that the development is out of context, if that's your view. You also need to think about whether you think that the scale and massing of the dwellings are appropriate within that plot. There's obviously also the question of mix. One or two members had raised the fact that they were large 5-bedroom houses. So you need to think about whether that would form part of your reason for refusal, and also whether it would how that would sit with policy CS3. So if you're saying that, whether you're saying that larger houses of those type are still out of character with the area there. And then obviously you need to think about the policies that you'd be relating all of that to. So they would typically, for a refusal along those type of grounds, be CS2, EV1, then the neighbourhood plan policies of S2 and H3. And then also there was a lot of talk about the design SPD, and of course the national planning policy framework. But that would be my advice there, really would be to look at first of all context within the area as a whole, then to sort of narrow that down and look at the design of the dwellings on the plots and work out what it is in terms of design that you don't like.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Grimley and Councillor Lowe. Councillor Lowe, as you, if I may, I'll take you first. As you proposed refusal, which policies are you proposing against?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think all of those policies we could use. I think it is overdevelopment of the site. I think it can change the street scene. It to actually change the appearance of the road in quite a substantial way, putting such big buildings there so close together. So I think we could use all of those. And I'd like to thank the officer for helping me come up with those answers.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley, did you want to?
Yeah, I was going to add, I think Karen had picked up on there, but I'd like to add about the design being out of context as well, contrary to the SPD.
Thank you. So, Councillor Tassell, you seconded this proposal. Do you have anything to add again for the reasons for refusal?
I think we should go with CS2 and EV1 as has been as has been agreed. They are outdacious, really, for the area. There are a lot of bungalows down Budden Lane, and these two will completely destroy the street scene.
Thank you. I have no other speakers indicated, so we'll go to the vote. So it's been proposed by Councillor Mark Lowe and Jacqueline Jackson, and followed by Karen Brightman. I can't hear you, Jacqueline. You're still muted.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I think we're probably going to say the same thing, and I did notice that the legal officer had put her hand up as well. So just before we go to the vote, I think it's a good idea to clarify for the recording what the proposal is. So as I understand it from what Karen said and the proposers have said since then, the application is proposed to be refused on the grounds of overdevelopment, in terms of it being out of character with the context and the character of the street, the scale and the mass of the building, and those design those design elements not being in keeping, and also with regards to the fact that they're large 5-bed houses in terms of housing mix. Therefore, it's considered the policy is contrary to core strategy policy CS2, local plan policy, SAFE policy EV1, the neighbourhood plan policy S2 and H3, the design SPD, the national design guidance and the MPPF, and also you know, when we're talking about context, members might also want to consider the core neighbourhood plan. So unless the other officers think I've missed something, that's a summary of the reasons for refusal which are being proposed.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to come in? No? Right, so we'll go to the vote. And those what we're doing as outlined by the officer. Councillor Bentley.
Against.
Councillor Camsell.
For, Chair.
Councillor Capleton.
For, Chair.
Councillor Charles.
For, Chair.
Councillor Forrest.
I'm for, Madam Chair.
Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the refusal.
Councillor Howe.
Against.
Councillor Lowe.
For, Chair.
Councillor Savage.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tassell.
For, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the refusal.
Thank you. And Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. For.
Thank you. And now my vote is for. So I make that 10 for, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 3 against. Could I have confirmation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, I agree with you. It's the proposition to refuse the permission was carried as a vote of 10 for and 3 against.
Thank you. Right, we now move on to item 4, which is P20 oblique 1181 oblique 2, Mr. J. Pugh 30 Coniston Crescent, Loughborough. Thank you. And we now go to Karen Brightman for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just wait for the slides to come on. Item 4 on the agenda tonight is for extensions to an existing house in multiple occupation. It's a semi-detached property and the extensions are 2-storey extension to the side and a single-storey extension to the rear. The address is 30 Coniston Crescent in Loughborough. Next slide, please. This slide shows where the site is, encircled in red there. You'll see the darker black area is the area where the extensions are proposed. Next slide, please. These are just, again, some street scenes in lieu of our normal visit. So you'll see there circled in yellow, the property on the left-hand side, at the end of a pair of semis. Next slide, please. It's looking in the opposite direction. Again, the property's circled, and this gives you an idea of what Coniston Crescent itself is like. So it's a typical winding residential road. As has been pointed out by objectors, there is quite a lot of on-street parking due to the proximity of these houses to a footpath that goes into the university. And there's also signs up that preclude university parking. So it obviously is an existing problem. Next slide, please. This is the rear of the property. So you'll see on the left there, the sort of existing single-storey extension at the back with 2 windows and a door. The extension to the rear infills that and the sort of patio door area that you can see there on the right. Next slide, please. This is just looking at it from the other side. So you can see there the patio door element, and then just on the left there of your slide, that existing single-storey outrigger that we were looking at when we looked at the shot from the other direction. Next slide, please. This is the front elevation of the property. It's just a close-up of what you've already seen. Next slide, please. These are some pictures that have been sent in by local residents that they've asked me to show you. They show the frontage of the property, and the important thing to note here is that there is a slight change in levels between the patio area where you can see the bins and the road that somebody was standing on to take these pictures. Next slide, please. These are the elevations. So on the right hand side, hopefully you can see that, mine's slightly hidden by our pictures. That's how it is currently. But on the left hand side, this is the proposal. So you can see the extension there, the area with the lighter blue windows. You can see that it's sort of set down and back from the existing dwelling, and it mimics all the proportions in terms of windows, etc., that dwelling has. Next slide, please. This is the extension to the rear. So this is what we were looking at pictures of earlier. So you can see there on the left hand side, that's sort of existing structure. And you can see there on the proposed rear elevation that the extensions at the back sort of fill across the back and make that all flush. Next slide, please. These are the existing floor plans. Currently there are 5, it is already a house in multiple occupation, and it has 5 bedrooms. So you can see that those are there. There's 3 on the ground floor and 2 on the first floor with associated bathrooms. Next slide, please. The proposed floor plan increases the number of bedrooms at the property to 6, which is at the absolute limit that you could do without it needing a change of use. And those bedrooms, they're provided. There are 3 on the ground floor, and there are 3 on the ground floor and 3 on the top floor there. Next slide, please. The main issues to consider tonight are design. In a way, that's, in this case, a bit of a non-issue, because the design, as we saw from the slides, completely aligns itself with our SPD. It does all the things that an extension is supposed to do. Amenity, again, there are no issues with regards to amenity. It meets with all the tests that are set out in the SPD to judge whether there is any harm to neighbours, and there isn't any, so it doesn't contravene any of those policies or guidance. Car parking, this size of dwelling as extended would require 3 spaces, or that would be the guideline, and that's exactly what's provided. There are 3 spaces shown with an associated drop curb, so that those would be parking to the front of the property off the road. And I just want to remind members tonight that we're not dealing with a planning application for a new HMO. This is an existing HMO. So what we're looking at is an additional bedroom added onto that existing use, which is something that could be done without a change of use anyway. It's only when HMOs become more than 6 bedrooms in size that necessitates a change of use planning application. So we are purely looking at the normal things we would look at with an extension, which are the things that are set out in our extensions policy H17 and our design policies EV1 CS2, etc. So that concludes on the officer's report element. You'll see that there were some late objections that were reported to you in the extras report. Those, as the report sets out, generally cover highway issues, and there's a concern from residents that highway issues in this case haven't been properly looked at because there wasn't a full assessment of traffic levels and so forth in the area. As the extras points out, that isn't something that we would do for an extension to a residential property. It wouldn't be proportionate to do that, and it would be somewhat unreasonable to ask for that every time somebody was extending a house. There's some questions about the spaces, the car parking spaces at the front of the house. As the report points out, those are within the guidelines that are set out by Leicestershire County Council as Highway Authority. So there's no concern there from officers that those spaces are in any way substandard. And it's also referenced in the extras report about parking, which we touched on earlier. But I need to point out that that is an existing issue. These are things in the area that aren't as a result of this development, or wouldn't be made worse as a result of this development, because it does provide parking at the required standards, and we can't seek to address existing issues via refusal of a residential extension such as this. We also had a representation that came in, I think, earlier today, so it didn't make it into the extras report, but that was again submitted by a resident. He raised issues about occupancy of the building, and the fact that if we allow extra additional bedrooms, where will that stop? Well, that would absolutely stop here, because to make the property any bigger or have any more bedrooms, as I said earlier, would need a further planning application. And he also raises issues around parking, but those are things that we have already touched on in the report and in the extras, and they're not things that are related to this development as such. And I do need to just finally point out something that I missed earlier, and just remind members that planning permission was granted for this exact same scheme back in 2015. The only reason it's before you again is because that particular proposal wasn't implemented, so the planning permission lapsed, and that in itself is a material consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Excuse me, thank you very much. I'll now go to Karen Widdowson, because I think we have one speaker to this.
Yes, Chair. So, Councillor Smidovich, I'm about to start the clock, so your time starts now. Can you? Thank you.
Oh, good evening, members. I hope you can hear me. I request that this is deferred, this application is deferred. I'm fully appreciative that it is an HMO, but in your deliberations, I ask you to consider the checkered history and why residents have concerns about the future and the number of occupants. It is a duty of the planning department to prevent crime and disorder, and quite understandably, residents are perplexed as to why the applicant has been allowed to contravene the planning regulations for nearly 20 years. They've asked for a professional analysis of the safety risks to be reviewed under the auspices of the local highways authority because of the narrowness of the crescent of the design of the road and the sloping angle of the driveways, particular concern in the winter months. Manoeuvring in and out of the driveways, the length of the crescent and adjacent roads has become a significant problem. The location of this property is an added problem as students are leaving their cars and visiting the campus. Today, the university has undertaken yet another disciplinary to add to the 13 fines and penalties recorded in a recent 2-month period. They say it's the tip of the iceberg and the signage that they have put up is ignored. They would welcome action to be taken. For those who don't know the location, of the 56 properties in Coniston Crescent, 24 are rented and have between 5 and 6 occupants, potentially 144 student bed spaces and their vehicles. This would not be evident to those who do not know the area, and today's photograph, I think, probably was taken at a quiet time. Number 30 is located 30 feet from the main pedestrian and cycle access to the campus and the library, which is open 24 hours a day and situated at the top of the T junction. Therefore, and in addition, it is going to be the entrance to the enterprise zone. When the first application was made for this property in 2001, the highways officer wrote to our planning department and said, assuming that this property was to be retained as a Class 3 home, as it was, 3 parking places would be required. He pointed out to planning officers that he was dubious that the plans were for a family home. Our planning officer then required the 2 bedrooms in the front to be removed. In 2006, the highways officer's suspicions were correct and it was approved on officer delegation, but the wall and the parking was still ignored. In 2015, I objected to the further extension because it already had 5 bedrooms and at least 6 occupants. The applicant was again told to remove the dividing wall and provide the parking space, but it's still there 20 years later without being removed, nor the parking spaces provided. The dimensions of the rooms, these 2 small rooms, are not on the plan, and the housing standards officer and I discussed this, and he said he agreed to this going through, didn't object because he thought the removal of the wall and the enlarged dining space would be useful. Unfortunately, the applicant has a history of applying for dining rooms, which have frequently morphed into bedrooms, as this committee itself has seen. So residents want to know why planning, planning considerations and orders are ignored. The original photograph on the application was taken 5 years ago and it was out of date, which is why we sent the photographs in this week of what it now looks like. So yes, parking, amenity, design and the location are all problems for the residents, and we are also very curious as to where the bins and any bicycles will be stored, because there will be no room in the front, and to say that they will be restored at the back
time is up,
is unlikely.
Time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Am I on? Yes. Thank you very much. I will go back to Karen Brightman a moment, just to remind people, myself as chair, this is already approved for an HMO. It's already got a number of bedrooms, and also it did have planning permission granted in 2015, and we are looking at this now because it was lapsed. The approval was given then, but I will pass back to Karen Brightman.
Yeah, not a great deal to add really, other than obviously we're suggesting a condition that the parking areas are provided along with a drop curb. If that doesn't happen, we've got enforcement we can take enforcement action if the development itself happens. Obviously, that's not what's happened in the past. So there hasn't been a condition that could be enforced on the 2015 application anyway. And just again to stress that parking problems in the area as a result of the university are not related to this extension to an existing HMO, and we need to be mindful that it is only one additional bedroom to a use that's already permitted. Anything that takes the use up beyond the 6-bedroom limit would obviously need to be subject to a planning application to change the use to a larger HMO. If that was done without, so if additional bedrooms were added without that permission, again, there would be a chance to, it would be something we could take enforcement action against. I don't think there's anything additional I need to say.
Thank you. Councillor Tassell.
Thank you. Can I ask, I know it's only one person and it's only one bedroom, but what is the saturation point of students around that area, please?
It's not relevant.
It's not going to be relevant to this particular planning application because we're not establishing whether it's acceptable to have an HMO or not. So that's why it won't have been covered in the report.
Okay, I'm with
you. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, given that it's only it is one bedroom on a existing HMO, I don't think the balance is particularly relevant. It's all the area already has 8 HMOs, what have you. So I think we I think I'd like to praise officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
I was going to second that, Chair. And I would just like to ask the officers, could they not permit this under permitted development?
They can't with HMOs. If Jackie, could you clarify for us, please?
Yeah, you are correct that C4 HMO dwellings do benefit from permitted development rights, but you've got the 2-storey extension and they couldn't do that element under permitted development.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll check it anyway, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I see no more hands. I've got it proposed by Councillor Grimley and seconded by Councillor Lowe that we go with officer's recommendation. So I shall now call the names again. Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Camsell.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Capleton.
For, Chair.
Councillor Charles.
For, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Forrest.
Reluctantly for.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. For.
Councillor Howe.
Abstain.
Councillor Lowe.
For, Chair.
Councillor Savage.
For, Chair.
Councillor Tassell.
For.
Councillor Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. Reluctantly for.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Again, reluctantly for.
And myself is for. So I make that 11 for, 1 against and 1 abstaining. If the officer could just confirm that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree. The proposition was carried with a vote of 11 for, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, there we are, people. Getting there. Item 6, a list of applications that's been determined under delegated powers. Pages 88 to 102. This is just for information normally, unless anybody has got anything of burning desire to discuss or point out to us? Otherwise, we normally take it as read. Councillor Tassell.
Yes, it's on page 98 and it's 63 IZ Road, Shepshed. It's been refused. It is a bungalow that they wanted to put bedrooms in the roof. It's situated next door to a house, and it has been rendered the same colour as the house. And I would like to speak to someone as to why on earth it was refused when they've just agreed one across the road.
I think that, Councillor, I'm not sure that the officers would be able to answer that. Now, you say on page 98?
Yes.
I can't see one in 98 in Thurmaston.
Page 12 of 15. It's the Shepshed one.
Oh, 12 of 15. So it's right.
Yeah, I think. Thanks,
I
Chair.
think that one
I've got it. Yeah, it's obviously something that doesn't need to be discussed here at Plans Committee tonight. I'm more than happy to get the case officer to contact you to explain the decision.
That's what I was hoping. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think in future, and for all of us really, if we see anything on this list when we get the agenda, we are more than allowed, more than permitted to contact the officer or the department and have a word with it. Councillor Forrest, you wanted to?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Fryer. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, there is an item in our ward, in Jenny and I's ward, and I don't understand it. But you're quite right, of course. I needn't raise it here. I will deal direct with the officer in the planning department. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I think that applies to all of us. This is why this list goes out to us, and this is what we need to look at. Thank you very much. Well, I don't see anything else exciting except to thank you all very much and to wish you a very good evening. I managed in the break we had to put my supper on, and poor old Ian, who's sitting at the end of the table, can smell it. But yes, just to give you a heads up as well, our next meeting's on the 3rd of December at 5 p.m, which means we join at 4:30. You will be getting information via Democratic Services, Karen and her team, and some of the players. We're looking at a way of speeding up the meeting by using a different method of voting rather than having a named vote for everything and anything, which I work out normally adds possibly up to an hour to our discussions. So watch this space. We may be being used, as we were earlier this year, as the test bed for the rest of the council. Okay, safe times, folks, and thank you very much.